Good morning, Chairman. We are now live.
Thank you, Thomas. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone present in the chamber and those listening online to the Business of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Richard Wright and I'm Vice Chairman of this committee. Councillor Alex Orr, the Chairman of the committee, has sent his apologies and therefore I'm acting as Chairman on his behalf. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and all your comments will remain accessible online. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception and assemble in the front car park and await further instructions. Can I request everyone present to ensure your mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting? And may I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. A request to speak will be collected by Councillor Vernon today, who's in the Vice Chairman's seat. Can I have a vote of approval for Councillor Vernon to be the Vice Chairman, please? Yeah, those that are listening, yeah, thank you. I'll try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. I would appreciate contributions to be succinct and concise and also that you indicate early when you wish to speak. And we'll now move on to the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Hall and we have Councillor Tyrrell replacing Councillor Hall for this meeting only. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Declarations. There is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interest. Do members wish to declare any? Yes, Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding item 6, for probity reasons, I'd like to declare I have a close family member who holds a senior position within Network Rail. However, he has no dealings within Lincolnshire whatsoever. Secondly, again regarding item 6, there are references to Hull Trains in the report. My father was actually one of the founders of Hull Trains. However, he is now retired and no longer has any role, and therefore I do not feel that any of these reasons preclude me from taking part in the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other declarations? No. Okay, item 3 then is minutes of the meeting held on 29th of April 2024. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. So please turn to pages 7 to 14 of the agenda pack. So do we have anything to raise on the minutes from those pages? No. Okay then, do I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Thank you, Councillor Brooks. And a seconder, Councillor Gibson. I'll put my glasses on for the rest of this meeting. All those in favour? That's the majority, thank you. I'll say, sorry, abstentions, sorry. Yep, thank you, Councillor Strengle. Any other abstentions? No. Councillor Tyrrell. Right, announcements by the Chairman. I have no announcements as such, but I would like to just say a big thank you, I think, on behalf of the committee. I don't think it's been said, to Councillor Brooks, who previously chaired this committee and did an excellent job, a much better job than I'm going to do today, thrown into the fire for this meeting. But I'd just like to say that it was a pleasure being on the committee under you as the Chairman, Councillor Brooks. Right, we have 5 pre-decision items to consider. Therefore, I'd like to stress the importance of taking reports as read, and I ask that our presenters summarise the key points and the type of input expected by the committee. Introductions of reports will ideally be around 5 minutes, so we have time to consider and debate. That being said, we're being joined by partners from East Midland Rail and Network Rail who will be sharing visual presentations in support to our discussion and debate of item 6. Do we have any Executive Councillor announcements, Tom? None. And
good morning, Chairman. Congratulations. No announcements from me.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. And nothing from Councillor Perrotton Williams. No, okay. Right. Finally, are there any announcements by senior officers?
Nothing, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 5 then is the Lincoln Townsdale Sinsel Bank Rejuvenation Project. This pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 15 to 30 of the agenda pack. The report outlines the Sinsel Bank rejuvenation project that aims to revitalise the area for residents and businesses. It involves implementing a master plan and place-shaping framework to improve various aspects of the neighbourhood through different themes and is part of the Lincoln Town deal funded by the government's Levelling Up programme. This rejuvenation scheme aligns with the Lincoln Transport Strategy and is considered crucial for the overall Lincoln Town investment plan. A decision is due to be taken by the Leader of Council, Executive Council for Resources, Communications and Commissioning and the Executive Council for Highways, Transport and IT between the 17th to 28th of June. Before we move on to the presentation, I would like to note that Councillor Debbie Armiger is in attendance as the local member for Park Division. It's therefore asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support recommendations to the Executive Councillors and that we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillors in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Jonathan Evans, Head of Highways Client and Contractual Management Services. Jonathan.
Apologies, Chair. Sam Edwards is doing this paper.
That's not what it says on my agenda. Sam.
No problem. Thank you, Chair, and morning all. So yeah, so this scheme, as you've outlined, is a pre-key decision paper. This scheme itself was part of the overall Towns Fund that the City of Lincoln Council was successful in securing. That was 19 million back in 2020. This is one of various schemes that are being brought forward across the city. Part of it also being part of the overall Towns Fund is that this complements what's in the paper, other things that have taken place in the Sinsel Bank area, for example, the recent resident parking initiative that's been put in place. Essentially, this is the construction or the widening and construction of a footway cycleway along Sinsel Bank or Sinsel Drain that links as a green corridor between South Park Avenue and therefore South Common through to the city. It's to improve linkages, provide improved alternative travel patterns, and also incorporates some of the gateways and greenings that have been outlined. Now, those are still being worked on by the City of Lincoln Council, but they'll likely include a number of parks, improvements, sustainable urban drainage, totems, flag signs, and really sort of improve the look and the feel of the Sinsel Bank area, which, as I say, complements the footway cycleway that we're constructing as part of the works. This scheme, as I say, is in line with the residents' parking, but it also brings in a one-way system, which has gone through the approval process already as far as planning a res committee that will allow this to be constructed, so this part of Sinsel Bank turns southbound only. We've been working with residents and businesses in numerous consultations, which has led to the successful one-way system implementation. This is also to stress this particular scheme was included in the Lincoln Transport Strategy. So again, outlines about trying to provide green and alternative travel patterns. Should a key decision be taken, the next step will be for the grant funding agreement to be signed with the city. And then we move on to procurement in July through to August before we start in August for a period that finishes in sort of early 2025. And as outlined in the paper, the cost estimate we're looking at is circa 3 million. However, we are obviously, until we get prices back from the contract, we won't know for sure, but that's the sort of envelope that we're looking, which falls within the funding, well within the funding bracket provided. So I'm conscious of time and the packed agenda, so I'll stop there and ask for any questions.
Thanks a lot, Sam. And if I can start with Councillor Armiger, who's attended specifically to ask questions on this item.
I would like to ask what measures will be put in place to support local shops during the construction phase to ensure they remain accessible to customers and to prevent them from losing business due to the works being done.
Like to answer, Sam?
Okay, thank you for the question. So yeah, we've been working with business and will continue to do so. We'll be, as part of the works, employing a public liaison officer that will be sort of meeting with residents and businesses to keep them regularly updated. We will be maintaining access. It may be restricted at times as we're doing the works, and the traffic management, as included in the paper, is yet to be fully defined, but it's very likely to be a range of road closures and diversions as part of it to construct because of the narrow nature of the road. As far as supporting the businesses, we can't and won't sign individuals, but we can keep signs open, things like businesses open as usual, and we can engage in public social media as we do to put out the positive messages about it. Other elements that the businesses can look into is a tax relief through the district council. It's not something as a county council we are in charge of, but it's something that they can appeal or ask from the City of Lincoln Council for. But we will do our utmost to keep it open, but there will be a level of disruption, and I'm not going to shy away from that, but the result of doing the works will be far more positive.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Armitage? Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I did raise at the last meeting, I'll probably raise at the next meeting as well, about cycle facilities. I'm pleased that the cycle facilities in, this plan, what's called the, the green corridor, but what sort of thrown me is there an overall plan to link this cycle path with any other? Because if you take it, it starts at South Park Avenue, there's nothing there. There's no cycle paths towards South Park Avenue. Stephen Street, yeah, you got St Mary's Street, and then you can get back onto the cycle path. So what I really want to sort of understand is if there's an overall plan, or is it bits and bobs here and there? Thank you.
So there's an overall plan included in the what's called the LC WIP. So I'll get the acronym wrong here, but it's basically the local cycling and walking improvement plan, I think it is, which covers the Lincoln area. Now, I take that we can't do everything at once, and therefore it may come out as doing little bits here and there, but there are still some significant improvements from the scheme because you are linking Sinsel Bank, which has got a number of residents in there as better travel patterns. And actually, as it links through to South Park Avenue, there is a cycleway, footway as you go through the underpass under Cannock Hill and comes out the back and goes up the hill and actually links through to the top of there. So it's not as, I suppose, as clean or as clear as many would like, but I wouldn't say it stops and ends. It does link to others to improve those. And those are other areas that we can look to in the future if members want to invest in those kind of areas elsewhere in the LC WIP.
Councillor Tyrrell.
Thank you. Is this scheme actually going to be done in sections, or are you going to try and do it all in one go?
So it's difficult to define that if I'm being honest with you until the contract comes back about how they want to phase the works. It's unlikely we will close the whole length in one go because there's people that live there, they need access and so forth. So it's likely to be done in sections, but I can't confirm that here and now until we get the pricing and the programme back, but we can certainly feed that back to local members as we would do anyway once we know more. And that comes part of the social media campaign and the update to residents and also the public liaison officer, so we can update exactly what's going on as we're going through.
Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. I note that the work on this project is due to start in the summer of 2024, and in item 2.3 you talk about minimising impact on residents and also the football club. Clearly there needs to be some consideration to the football club with 10,000 people sort of coming to fixtures on a regular basis, and I wondered what steps you're taking to ensure there is minimal impact on match days, which could be midweek as well as during the week, as well as obviously on residents too. Thank you.
So we've had significant engagement with the football club. They've been part of the project board as we've been meeting every other week because of the sensitivity of their uses. They need to be involved because some of the permanent changes we're putting in around the one-way system has an impact on how they access the football ground and how the fans. And actually, it was the away home buses that were the issue to get through. So there's certain things that we enacted in the TRO, that was the one-way system that was opening up the route through to South Park Avenue that will be gated for those away buses, and being able to flip the one-way system over on that particular section for certain circumstances, hence the buses getting away. So they've been engaged throughout, and it's difficult to go into all the details, but they're very aware of it and they're factored into to what it is. But it will be quite changeable depending on who's playing, where they're coming from, that type of thing.
Just to come back on that quickly, and I know I'm not a football fan, I'd like to say at this point, although sort of obviously have some awareness of what goes on. So I understand that the fixture release date for League One fixtures is June the 26th, and this Executive Council decision is obviously due between the 17th and the 28th of June. Are you considering sort of the impact on potential fixtures and where people may be travelling from as part of the executive decision process?
So I'm also not a football fan, so I didn't know that came out. But the provisions that we've been talking through doesn't really have... The away fans get dropped off at the same place regardless of where they come in from. There are accessible buses that may be needed, and we've catered for that, and they can flip the one-way system to go out, so they're not waiting for the other fans to leave. The away coaches that come in, the away players coach will come in through the fire station, as they do now, and the away home buses. I'm not a football fan, as you can tell. They will access, like I say, through to South Park Avenue to have access through there. So yeah, we've covered every event and we've done that collaboratively with the football club, who are happy or content with the provisions that we've put in place.
No further questions. So just a couple from me, Sam. One on finance with regards to the fact that the majority of the money is coming from the Lincoln Town deal. So what contingency plans are in place if there's any delays there or shortfalls, and how will accountability be maintained for this financially? And the other one again is because it's so closely working with the City of Lincoln, it's certain aspects of the greening elements of the gateways still need tendering. Bearing in mind what we're talking about, disturbance and timelines, do we foresee any issues that way?
So from a finance perspective, our estimated cost is around 3 million, but you'll notice there's £650,000 of risk in there, which is quite significant for a scheme of this scale. In addition, the actual funding is higher than that. So from memory, there's 300,000 or 400,000 that's in excess of that. This is for the gateways and greening. But the reason we haven't instructed that in this tender and working on is that can be scalable. So if, for example, the costs come in lower, then we can scale that 400,000 for the gateway greening to £1 million, say. If it comes in higher, then it scales down. So that is, I guess, our pot to scale the gateways and greenings through there, which is why we will instruct, once we get into contract, we will know our price then and know where we're going. We will then request a price from the contractor for these additional works to ensure they don't go over the budget allowance that we've got in place.
Okay, there's no further comments then. Thank everybody for that debate, and I'll move that the committee supports the proposed recommendations as they are set out on page 17 of the report, and I ask that the comments raised by the committee be shared with executive councillors for their consideration ahead of decision being made between 17th and 28th of June. I suggest that we note the ongoing concerns of Councillor Clark over joined up cycleways, and when looking at the planning we get somebody that knows something about football. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Werner. Okay, all those in favour? Thank you, that's a majority. Any abstentions? And anybody against? No. Okay, thank you very much, that's moved. Okay, item 6 is the rail recovery and strategic role in providing connectivity, supporting Lincolnshire communities and economy. This scrutiny report and associated appendices can be found on pages 31 to 36 of the agenda pack. The report provides an update from Network Rail on strategic planning for future usage and infrastructure requirements of the rail network, focusing on maintenance and operational schemes for the control period 7. It includes an overview from East Midlands Rail, which operates most regional services in Lincolnshire, detailing the current service and fleet. Additionally, the report outlines plans for the Skegness summer service and proposed station improvements across the region. I would like to welcome our presenters, Tom Ingray, who's the lead strategic planner for South Network Rail. He's in the chamber today. Jamie Tuckwood, Permanent Timetable Improvement Manager, East Midlands via Teams, and George Selby, Stakeholder, Engagement Manager, East Midlands Rail, also by Teams. I'll hand over then to, actions. It is asked that we discuss the progress on rail-related issues with representatives of Network Rail and East Midlands Rail, and consider infrastructure and regional rail service provision and role of rail in Lincolnshire. And I'll now hand over to Jane Wingard, Jamie Tuckwood and George Selby to present.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to start with East Midlands Rail with Jamie Tuckwood. They're going to present first, and then if members would like to ask any questions directly after that presentation, and then Tom Ingry from Network Rail will then present, and then again there'll be an opportunity after the presentation for questions as well. So I hope you enjoy the presentations. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's George Selby from East Midlands Railway. Jamie, unfortunately, is not very well today, so he's not been able to join us. But as Stakeholder Engagement Manager, I'm delighted to run through some of the things that we're looking at and take away any questions that you might have. So if I could move to the first slide, if that's okay, please. The areas we're going to touch upon is a little bit of context. So the May 2023 reinstatements that have broadly been positive and got us to a point where we're back to where we was before May 2021 and some of the impacts that COVID brought. I'm going to touch upon Summer Skegness because that's crucial to the region, crucial to East Midlands Railway, and the provisions we're putting in place for that for this summer. Some exciting news around some investment that we've achieved and succeeded in bringing into the company with our regional fleet refurb. Some information on the progress of the Boston and Skegness New Town deal funding and how the improvements to the station are going. And then a little bit on what our future plans and ambitions are for service enhancements in the area. Before I get to that bit, that is very much in a sort of scoping exercise at the moment. So a bit details light, but it's to sort of show our ambitions in that space. So if I could move to the next slide, please. This is the context of the reinstatements that we brought in about a year ago now. They're broadly bedded in well. These are in response to some of the commuter services that were still being requested for at that time. It's in response to the real positive leisure recovery that we've seen post-COVID, so much so that we're actually comfortably carrying more passengers now than pre-COVID actually. There's still a challenge financially because the sort of, what word am I after? The means in which they're travelling has changed. So the commuter season ticket purchases have dropped quite dramatically and leisure doesn't quite cover that financially. However, in terms of footfall alone, we are in a stronger place than we was before the pandemic. So on that list there, you can see that 6 weekday services were reinstated with a service extended and leaning into that leisure recovery that I've spoken about. 8 Saturdays were reinstated, 8 Saturday services were reinstated too. As I say, broadly bedded in well, and hopefully you've seen that in the region. Next slide, please. This is something we're really excited about for this summer. I'm a lad from Derby. I used to go to Chapel St Leonard's regularly to my grandma's caravan, so I've got fond memories of Skegness myself. This summer it's running from the 2nd of June, so it's just begun. We've had about a week of that beginning, and it runs until the 7th of September. This year we're going to have a 40% uplift in capacity compared to 2023, because if you recall last year we were in a difficult position with our fleet cascade. So the joke I sort of make is our 170s were almost like the Avengers. We're pulling them in from West Midlands trains, from Greater Anglia, from ScotRail, and you might see that when you travel on our trains, because you'll see on some there's a green interior with some of the seats, and there's a blue interior with others, and a red from Transport for Wales. But last summer that cascade hadn't completed. So to support last summer's summer Skegness timetable. We use bus replacements to supplement it. However, this year the cascade has completed, and therefore we're delighted to offer a complete rail proposition. And because that cascade's finished, we're seeing a significant uplift on capacity. There will be rail replacement buses on standby. That's if we have an exceptionally good summer or demand exceeds that, but we're confident that our rail proposition will be able to cover it. We are strengthening weekday services, and that intelligence has been brought to bear from last summer. So basically the services that were most busy last summer are the ones that we've targeted for summer strengthening this year. And some of our trains will depart from platform 7 at Nottingham, because platform 2 is a shorter platform and limits the length of trains we can run. So those trains that will be 4 or 5 cars in length will depart from platform 7. Touching upon my personal experience, Derby, we are continuing to run our summer Saturday services. They start a little bit later, the 20th of July, running until the 7th of September, and that's to coincide with school holidays when obviously demand tends to go up. And these will be formed off 5-car 170 units, and you can see the timetable just below, and there's a link to our dedicated website which provides more information on it. And the 170s, you're perhaps accustomed to them in the region, but that's an image of one of the 170s to the right. Next slide, please. The customer experience is absolutely vital, and we want to. This is a significant revenue stream to us, and we want to encourage repeat custom, and therefore making sure that our passengers are happy and satisfied with the services is really important to us. For those that might be apprehensive or nervous or want to be organised, they can book their tickets in advance of the day they're travelling, or they can purchase it on the day if it's particularly good weather and it's just one of those things where you want to go to the seaside for the afternoon. There will be a queuing system in place at Nottingham. We are very experienced in delivering this. We've done this for many years, where there'll be a pre-booked line effectively for those who have booked in advance, and then a separate line for those that have bought on the day of purchase, and that again provides that confidence to those who have pre-booked. We're working with the train line, obviously a major retailer in the British rail industry, where we're sharing information on those trains that are perhaps busier than others. So again, if you are booking in advance and you're using the train line, which a lot of people do, you've got some indication of trains that you might want to take for more comfort or for reassurance. We have family packs. We've done this again for many years to keep the children entertained if they're waiting, or provide excitement on their journey, because it's a holiday for a lot of families. Giveaways such as headphones and buckets and spades. Hopefully the weather plays ball. Ponchos if it doesn't, and sweets. So hopefully it makes it a pleasurable and enjoyable trip for families. We are supplying extra staff, so there's management colleagues. That's already gone round actually, where we see a lot of our staff live, work and are residents in the area, so we seek management support, which we get a lot of buy-in for, and we also employ agency staff over the summer to support that too. Cleanliness, there's SQR scores, that service quality regime scores with the Department for Transport, that are absolutely vital to us. We scored very, very highly last summer, and this remains a priority to us. So we've got cleaning teams that will board the train at the beginning and terminus, as well as travelling on board to maintain those exceptionally high scores, and at the station at Skegness. And then there's other bits, so vacuum packs that families can apply for. That's to try and help minimise those with luggage and try and reduce the luggage that's been taken on board. Certainly the space that it takes up, to provide more seats for passengers and make it more enjoyable. There's going to be for those who pre-book, there's going to be video supplied as well with top tips. And with Butlins being such a desirable place for people travelling on that route, there's key information on how to get there and support buses once you arrive at Skegness that provide the onward travel, such as that intermodal connection. Next slide, please. This is a slide talking about our fleet refurbishment. We are very, very excited to be talking about this. As I said earlier on in the presentation, the fleet's been cascaded in, and the nature of that is that it's come from multiple operators, and it's really important to us that we have a consistent customer experience. It's taken some time, but we've secured funding to completely refurbish our Class 170s and 158 trains that you will see on your patch, so to speak. In this image, the 170s are in the bottom left and the 158s are in that top right. 158s primarily serve our Liverpool-Norwich line, but they will support the Summer Skegness, and they do occasionally find themselves onto Lincoln routes as well, so that they won't be a complete stranger to your region, and they're included in the refurbishment programme too. Their refurbishment is a little bit more stripped back. They're getting seat refurbishments, completely new coverings, improved CCTV, and passenger count improvements. However, the nature of them, they were built in the late 80s, and actually we're looking at sort of an EMR of 2030 and looking at the beginning to scope replacements for them. So the nature of that fleet is that they're going to be limited in terms of how long they will continue to serve. So therefore the refurbishment's a little bit scoped back on that one. The 170s we anticipate will serve us for many years to come. We're delighted to welcome them to our proposition and our fleet. Again, they are having a complete interior refresh with new carpets, new seat refurbishments, all the touch points, handles, etc. being replaced, tables, CCTV improvements, passenger count enhancements that help inform where we direct our fleet more intelligently. So although 20 years old or so, in terms of stakeholders and passengers in the region, whether you are in Lincoln or Derby, where I live, with the introduction of our brand new Aurora fleet, which are in the bottom right, the touch and feel for passengers across our whole region is going to be improved with either brand new trains or fully refurbished trains. Next slide, please. This is in regards to Boston and Skegness stations, which are having significant improvements. Both started in November 2023. Boston's progressing extremely well, where ticket halls and staff areas have been completed quite recently, a couple of months ago in March. Phase 2 is underway, where the ticket office, the ticket hall and staff areas are seeing refurbishments and improvements. And we are approaching small businesses, so there's a CAF and the opportunity for small startups that could utilise the new space, and our commercial teams are looking at propositions there. Skegness similarly started in November. There's been some challenges around some structural issues that have been uncovered during the strip out. Remedial works have taken place. It's added some delay to that project. However, concourse and platform lighting has been replaced. Phase 1 is due, with that delay, due to complete in October 2024, with phase 2 completing as it stands in May 2025. And we've had, although there's been challenges with that project, we've had local interest in terms of filling the cafe space and the propositions that will go in there to hopefully continue to improve it for future years. Next slide, please. This is regarding a bit in line with what I said a few minutes ago with the 158 replacements, almost an EMR 2030 vision that we're sort of building towards internally. And there's been scopes to look at how we best utilise our fleet. So the Class 170s and the Class 158s that you will see in your region, how is best to utilise them? Is there certain routes they're more suited towards? There's all manner of things. So, for example, the Class 170s pictured there have mid-train boarding, and that helps with dwell times at stations. So they might be better suited to particular routes where we've got schools and school children that board, and that can add delays to our service if you've got 30 school children congregated around a single door, and then that impacts our performance. So all these sorts of things are factored in, about almost like the marginal gains about how we can improve our performance. And then we're working with third parties and external agents about line speed improvements that might unlock future timetable improvements. As I say, lots of hurdles to go through with that. We've got some exciting propositions internally that we're working towards, but some way to go in terms of before we're in a firm position to talk about some of those. And that's about it, really. I'm happy to take any questions, and hopefully I can answer them in person, but otherwise I would just come back to you as soon as I possibly can.
Thank you for that, George. And we'll take the questions at that point then. So I've got Councillor Ashton first.
Thank you. I've never really heard the word supplying trains on a regular basis called a complete rail proposition. I'm also interested to note that the welcome given to the Class 170s as part of the EMR fleet. I remember them in this part of the country on Central Train 25 years ago. It's good that we've got them back. We've had an awful lot of dross in between. I would just like to ask around, I haven't picked up any mention of improving services at locations such as Sleaford, for instance, which is part of the EMR network, which seems to be the cause of significant delays in journey time for anyone wanting to use the train between either Lincoln and Skegness or Lincoln and Boston. If you're heading from Lincoln to Boston, then because of the way that the train services cross over at Sleaford, you miss the preceding service onward by 10 to 16 minutes, which means you end up with a 40 to 60 minute wait for the next train, and therefore journey times of getting on for 2 hours. I know it's great to have new shiny trains, but if you're waiting for that length of time for the next one, it doesn't matter how pretty the station is or how great the train is when you get on it. That's not going to encourage people to get on those trains, and it's exactly the same on that connection going back the other way. If you're travelling from Boston to Lincoln again, it can be a miss of as little as 8 minutes between effectively the train that you should be on leaving and the one that you're getting in on. And these feel, I appreciate Sleaford, and I appreciate the eastern part of the East Midlands Railways network. It's not as glamorous as Nottingham, it's not as glamorous as the Derby to Skegness stuff, but it's this kind of service that people in Lincolnshire rely on, or should be able to rely on, day in, day out. And I haven't heard any mention of any attempt to address this particular service or others that I'm sure are around. And I just wonder whether this is something that is planned to be picked up or not.
Thank you for your question. Completely understand the concerns. Without making light of it, because it's a very serious point, my partner's family live in Heckington, and my mother-in-law says much the same. She uses the train. She lives just round the corner from the station, and echoes much of what you say. It's a shame Jamie's poorly this morning, because being our planning manager, he's much closer to that to be able to answer. The final slide that I touched upon, which is looking towards improvements in future timetables, is aimed exactly on that. And actually, please don't think that the eastern portion of our services are in any way not prioritised. In many ways, what we're really excited about what we could unlock on the eastern portion of our route, and there's a laser focus. We've recently recruited a colleague called Chris Patman, who has vast rail experience. He's worked with Avanti. He lives in Newark, not far away, and he is our long-term strategy manager, and he is looking at how we can improve connections on that eastern portion, and potentially expand services as well. I can't go into too much detail. One, because it's in the early stages of being scoped. Two, unfortunately, it's not my area of expertise. But in the least, if I can reassure people in the room that we're absolutely laser focused on that, and and secondly, I can take the question away and hopefully provide some more detail after the meeting.
I'll move on from that for now, Councillor Ashton, because there's other questions. Councillor Vernon?
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say I'm delighted to see the increased capacity on the Skegness summer route. But what are you actually doing to encourage people to utilise that service? I note that sort of in your report, you've stated that capacity can be a challenge. And if I was travelling with young children and luggage, that would put me off going by train, to be honest. So I think sort of you obviously need to have a good PR sort of service going on with that. In terms of the additional services that you're looking at on the summer Saturdays, how far in advance are you publicising these? I did a quick search on Trainline last night and couldn't see the additional services coming up, however, may be incorrect. But if I was booking, I'd be booking now. So I think it's really important to get that out there and have those being booked so that you know how many people to expect on the train as well. The two other points I'd like to mention that we've not touched on sort of, I don't believe in your sort of comments, are the frequency of the trains between Lincoln and St Pancras and whether you have any plans to increase the frequency of those. And also Doncaster Airport shouldn't be understated either. I know it's not open at the moment, but there are plans afoot to reopen it, and it's something obviously being considered by Doncaster. Are you considering that when you're looking at your forward planning as well? Thank you.
Again, thank you for your question. I'll cover, so in terms of, but very quickly on Doncaster, again, with all respect for people in the room, and I do apologise for this, Jamie, being the planning manager, would be in a better place to have answered that, I'm afraid. Again, I'm more than happy to take that away and come back to you with a response about what we're planning to do in that area. On the London services, I'm afraid to say that there are no plans. I do know there are no plans to add any additional services to London from Lincoln via EMR. Obviously, I'm aware that LNER have some services in, I think, 5 a day. I believe LNER a peer operator that operate from Lincoln to London, King's Cross directly. But I'm afraid we don't have any plans to add any in that on that route, I'm afraid. Just if you can, the first question, I was working backwards there. The first point around I apologise.
Publicising the booking of trains in advance.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, I beg your pardon. Sorry about that. You can book 3 months in advance. They will be available on journey planners if you look 12 weeks out. And we do, last summer actually, because of the challenges we had with the Cascade, we actually rode back on some of our marketing on Skegness because we were in this sort of catch-22 of not wanting to put people off, but aware of the capacity challenges. This summer, we're in a different position. So we do have, as the summer continues to build, and we move towards a 6 weeks holiday, we do have some marketing exposure on social media and some local advertising on radio and things like that. As well as some materials going in at some of our key hub stations at Derby, at Nottingham, to promote travel to the coast, because it's a significant revenue line for us. We want to support local tourism, and summer Skegness is a key focus for us as a business. So we do have plans to promote it as the summer progresses.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for those questions. I'm just going to throw a couple of quick ones in because we need to move on this. But George, I mean, I remember being here 2 years ago and asking questions, and to be honest with you, some of the answers were similar. I also remember being with the minister pre-COVID at Ruskington, where we put the new ramp in, and we were talking then about EMR upgrades to the stock. So two questions really are, if we're now beginning to scope the upgrades, how long will it take to actually put them in place, and how long will it take them to scope? And do we need them? Because a really nice upgrade to the trains would be ones I can actually sit on, where you haven't put the seats so close together I can't even get my knees in if anybody's 6 foot tall. And the other one is, again, going back to Skegness. Now, we've heard your family connections and your fondness for Skegness, but it would appear to be that we can only be fond of it on a Saturday, because families can't even start out from Sleaford until 10 o'clock. So if we're talking about the tourism, if we're talking about the effect on the economy and how we get people to these places, when are we actually going to do something about the fact that actually Sunday, I know everybody's entitled to a rest, but surely we can have services that run at a decent time for people to actually use their downtime if they want to use trains?
So on the fleet refurb, they're due to begin in the autumn. So we're looking at September, October time with the first Class 170s being taken off use to begin those refurbishments. To not impact passenger services, it won't be complete until 2026. So incrementally, 170s will come out, go through the refurbishment programme with third-party engineering companies to then be put back on at a later date. But yes, so certainly from sort of the early part of next year, you'll start to see the trains that have been fully refurbished entering active use. On the point in regards to Sleaford and connections to the coast, on that specific issue, again, I apologise. Not being from the planning team, I'm unsure what the answer would be on that, whether it's an operational issue, whether it's crewing issues. I'm unsure, but I'm more than happy to take that away again with the other two questions and provide an answer to you after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is it a quick one, Councillor Ashton? Question?
Thank you, yes. Just picking up, I'm aware as part of station refurbishment work ongoing that when EMR first took on the franchise, there was the expectation that every station would be upgraded with things like Wi-Fi and the ability to buy a ticket on the platform. Has that taken place? Will that take place? And is that really good value for money when that programme is being extended to places such as Thorpe Culvert, which on current statistics has one train a day? I'm just wondering whether there are better value for money things that EMR could do. And just picking up on the numerous questions that have come from around the chamber around services and planning and improvements, I would add to that the potential that there is to promote Skegness not just to the East Midlands and Derby, but to those other parts of the country that don't have a particularly good rail service to a seaside resort such as Peterborough. And if it's not possible to answer them questions and the others from members of the committee this morning, whether Jamie would be willing to come and talk to us directly, appreciating the experiences of members and people in our communities might be useful as part of that planning process in the future.
Yeah, just touching upon the final question, that if that was of use, we'd be delighted to. It would be, there's several members of the TIC planning team who are very open and transparent and would be happy to come meet or have a remote meeting to talk about some of those details in depth and how we come to decisions and the considerations that go into planning the timetable. In terms of sort of advertising outside of our patch, I mean, our rail proposition supports it. We work with external tourism boards and external agencies to promote travel to the coast. We are limited in that geographically. We can only sort of reach those on our patch. Ironically, actually, from some research, there's quite a lot of people that travel to Skegness from Scotland, and they come down through the East Coast Main Line and then head across east from Grantham and places like that. So there is reach. We are somewhat limited because geographically we target our location, if that makes sense, locality. And on providing ticket purchasing facilities at stations, we've introduced a number of smart kiosks in the region that were a much more cost-effective way of providing ticket purchasing facilities for passengers where they need, and they also come with customer information screens in places where we can then provide onward travel information to passengers where perhaps at the station that wasn't there before. So it provides sort of a double benefit, I suppose.
Thank you, George. Do you have a quick question, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, very quick one. I share with the other councillors the issues of the train service within Lincolnshire, but can I have some clarification? On page 34, it says the cancellation of HS2. Is Lincolnshire Rail Network receiving any of the promised funding for the North, or aren't we in the North anymore? Was we ever in the North?
From an EMR point of view, we are the contracted operator. So in terms of, obviously I'm close to Rail News, the HS2 funding that might be attributed to other areas, that I'm afraid that's other bodies that would determine where that's spent, where that's the Department for Transport in coordination with bodies like Network Rail and goodness knows what, and third parties like Midlands Connect who campaign for funding in certain areas. We do work closely with them, but as the operator, we have no determination of where any subsequent government funding like that goes, I'm afraid.
Thanks, George. We might get those answers under the next part, Councillor Clark. Okay, is that, have we finished now with the questions on there, and we can hand back to either Jane or Tom to take us on to the next part, please?
Thank you, George. That was really helpful, and we'll pick up on the points that need some clarification from Jamie. And now we can look forward to a presentation from Network Rail, and Tom Ingray is going to take us through the infrastructure plans for the region in the next 5 years, CP7. Thank you, Tom.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Ingray, Lead Strategic Planner for Network Rail Eastern Region, and I cover the Anglia and East Midlands part of the geography. I should note that Lincolnshire is split between the North and East route in Eastern and East Midlands. My colleague Richard Bates unfortunately couldn't be here today, so I'll try and address the questions that relate to the North and East route in Lincolnshire as best I can. The key aim, I think, from the presentation from us today is to talk about the conclusion of our strategic advice, which was published towards the end of last year. And I've also wanted just to pick up on a few questions that Jane has raised with us recently around the CP7 plan and other projects ongoing in the region. So, if I could go to the next slide, please. So the question underpinning the strategic advice, to recap, is how can economic growth and connectivity be best supported by the rail network in Lincolnshire? I won't dwell too much on the challenges in the rail sector that my counterpart in East Midlands Railway has also alluded to, but clearly there is a challenging environment at the moment in the rail sector as we adjust to new travelling trends and the impact that has on our funding. That said, what we have tried to do with the Lincolnshire Strategic Advice is bring out the wider aims and wider benefits of rail addressing a number of challenges, be that connectivity, akin to the point that the one of the councillors raised about connections at Sleaford, or also addressing social deprivation and opportunities to connect different parts of the county throughout our geography. The core recommendations of the completed work, and I should add, if anyone hasn't had the opportunity to see that, it's available on our public website under the long-term planning section, Network Rail. Core recommendations are looking to progress the plans to extend the London King's Cross Lincoln service to Cleethorpes. As my colleague referred to, ultimately LNER are the primary body taking forward that proposition. So there may be a limit to which I can immediately address questions on that one. But it's very much something we see as a benefit to the county. We also recommend exploring opportunities to improve the passenger experience at Lincoln Station, with particular reference to the footbridge. And I must say, this morning when I arrived just before 9 o'clock, I noticed the volume of passengers coming towards the footbridge and the width constraints that are highlighted in our work. We also recommend exploring and replacing the level crossing with a footbridge at Crowell. There's a particular interface there with our aspiration to increase and maintain existing freight flows in the region. And we also recommend exploring the operational feasibility of removing the near 3-hour gap in morning services from Barton-on-Humber. As I'm sure you can appreciate, with the rail industry as it's structured today, there is a need here to work with our partners on this very closely. I think the particular opportunity highlighted in the East Midlands Railways presentation is the opportunity to work with their dedicated strategic planning manager, Chris Patman. We've been feeding in some work to their rural connectivity and regional line speeds study. And I think I was very much grateful to be referred to as a partner at the start of this meeting. I think we really see that partnership working as a key area to continue working with yourselves, and also the subnational transport bodies of Midlands Connect towards the Midlands, and Transport for North looking towards the northeast. So the other recommendations on the next slide, please, reference the proposal from the Nuclear Waste Services for a geological disposal facility at Thedlethorpe. I suppose to clarify Network Rail's position on this one, we have been approached by the Nuclear Waste Services as part of their own planning work. The DfT asked us as part of this work to consider the viability of passenger service benefits arising from the proposal. So the work we've done here is ultimately subject to the proposal developing further. I should add that it would be challenging to make a case for reinstating services without an agent of change such as the proposal. So what we did in our work is we looked at the theoretical feasibility of services either coming from Grimsby in the north or via Boston in the south. We concluded that the greatest value for money, particularly considering the passenger service options, would be likely via the southern approach. That's not an absolute position from Network Rail. I think at this stage we've not been consulted further by the Nuclear Waste Services provider, but we will of course consider any business development proposals that are put forward, and clearly there's a big opportunity to work with yourselves as partners on the rail passenger service options arising. I think to expand on the point about connections at Sleaford with what I assume was referenced the rail services, the further opportunity beyond that we see as an opportunity to take forward with yourselves and Midlands Connect and other partners is the opportunity to improve multimodal integration across the county. So thinking about how our road network and our bus network interfaces with our stations, there's a direct relationship between both better passenger outcomes of an integrated first last mile journey, but also an opportunity for us to increase our revenue base, which gives us greater opportunity to take forward different options in the future. Finally, the recommendation to explore funding for electrification of the Great Northern Great Eastern Line between Peterman and Doncaster via Lincoln is a medium-term priority. Now, perhaps just to add a bit of realism to what short, medium term might mean, I think medium term we would refer to as a likely proposition in the 2030s. It's difficult to say there is a committed rail electrification pipeline over time in the manner which we would prefer to perhaps meet our net zero objectives, but equally there is significant electrification being funded by the DfT at the moment, most notably the Midland Mainline electrification and the TRU electrification. So what we're looking to do in our role in strategic planning is to propose the forward options so that as and when funding becomes available, we can be clear on our priorities. And given the primary freight flows on the line and also the diversionary use of the service, we see the G&G as a key primary option in that medium-term phase. Next slide, please. I note from the last presentation the questions around the High Speed 2 Eastern Leg cancellation and what that means with regarding to Network North and future rail enhancements. I mean, there's a limit to what I could say given the pre-election requirements at the moment. But to be frank, were that, even without that particular position at the moment, much more work needs to be done from a network rail perspective to be clear on definitive outcomes of what that may mean across our wider network in Lincolnshire. The Network North announcement means we really need to re-evaluate the primary factors of High Speed 2's original intent. And we are continuing to work with the DfT on that at the moment. In particular, we're looking at a work stream with them called Midlands, Yorkshire and North East. What that work looks to do is to understand the impact to the Midlands and the North East from the removal of the eastern leg. And clearly, as part of that, we need to understand how that interfaces with the existing network and other long-term priorities of partners. Newark Flat Crossing is inevitably part of that question. And what I'm referring to there is that we are looking at the East Coast Main Line and what the consequences of that cancellation means. The existing timetable change is a microcosm of the challenges that we need to look at in the longer term of accommodating that that capacity and wider objectives, be that journey time or connectivity in the medium to long term on the East Coast Main Line. We're looking to develop a proposal on a future network study for the East Coast Main Line, and there has been some work started as part of the former integrated rail plan to look at some of the earlier stage outputs of that. So Newark, I think we obviously have to look at from both the perspective of the Midlands to Midlands flows coming from Immingham across to the Midlands, but also that primary intercity route. It would be challenging in isolation to make a business case for Newark Flat Crossing on the local flows and freight flows, but it remains one of the options that we need to explore as we look across that corridor-wide challenge over the longer term. Next slide, please. The slide here is just a very brief outline of the Control Period 7 funding. So just again to clarify, the funding for Network Rail's operational settlement, operations, maintenance and renewals, similar to the funding for our train operating colleagues, is linked to the Control Period 7 settlement. Enhancements is funded separately, either through other public funds, private funding, or the Rail Network Enhancements Pipeline. But just to touch on some key themes, customer and communities is a key part of that CP7 settlement. Likewise, our commitment to health and safety. We really need to address the productivity challenges within our own business to be able to address some of the wider funding challenges, but also give us the opportunity to progress new opportunities where they arrive. Environmental sustainability is clearly a challenge for us in the network, and in particular the East Midlands region, or route, sorry, has made a particular commitment to improve our drainage facilities. I think that's very much geared at short-term keeping the service today viable and performing well. And of course, there is a longer-term aspect to this beyond Control Period 7 of what those climate change factors mean to parts of our network that are more vulnerable to that. So, for example, the question of looking at a Mablethorpe service needs to be addressed in the context of the existing railways' resilience to future change as much as it is a new opportunity. Network and asset resilience is really focused around prioritising the areas of greatest network vulnerability and making sure we use our funding to address those accordingly. And likewise, with regard to keeping a resilient timetable, it's key that we work with our partners across all the TOCs and FOCs to maintain that today. And then shaping tomorrow's railway, which hopefully I've given you a flavour of as we've gone through. The particular focus in the East Midlands route major investment is the completion of the Midland Main Line electrification package. And there's also opportunities to look forward at future digital railway signalling packages. But I think the key thing for us with the funding environment as it is, and also mindful of the changing governance structure of the local mayoralties, both with the recent East Midlands Mayor and next year's elections with Lincolnshire, is understanding how we can work together to use funding across the Rail Network Enhancements Pipeline, which Network Rail typically proposes DFT, but also emerging funding from mayoralty funds as well. Next slide, please. Very quick one here, just highlighting the total funding for East Midlands in that settlement is 1.6 billion over the 5-year control period, and up to 1 billion enhancements, like I say, largely taking in that Midland Main Line electrification priority. Next slide, please. I wanted to finish on a few key issues that Jane has raised in industry meetings and we've discussed recently. I'm aware the Swindon re-signalling has been subject to changed timescales, and I wanted to pass on some commitments that the East Midlands route have shared with Jane recently. Very quick summary of the Swindon project. The primary aim of the project is to move the existing signal control from local boxes to Lincoln Control Centre, and removal of redundant line side equipment, and also upgrades to level crossings within that. There is a link also with an enhancements project, which I'll come on to in a second. But I think the key news to share today is the invitation to tenders have been prepared and issued. You may have seen recently Network Rail has issued a framework for major works in the Eastern region. So we're hoping we can assess that tender with a view to contract award in autumn, and then looking to start on site in spring 25 with a final completion stage in spring 2027. So I think ultimately final confirmation on these commitments will need to be evaluated once a procurement exercise is complete. But I wanted to reassure the members here today that is a key part of our CP7 plan going forward. Next slide, please. Access for all station improvements. So to recap, this is a national fund that looks at addressing accessibility gaps and provision across the country. Our team in strategic planning have been preparing our views on prioritisation in advance of informing contributions from partners here and other bodies mentioned, particularly East Midlands Railway as well. And I'm really pleased that our own recommendations for Sleaford and Stamford as particular priorities have been taken forward. I should note, though, that the caveat there is that the initial phase is for design feasibility before a final decision is taken on those schemes to go forward. I'm familiar with both stations, and I think they're both very compelling cases, particularly from the safety perspective of using crossings as an alternative for passengers with reduced mobility, but also passengers with luggage or pushchairs and other needs. Gainsborough Lee Road Station, again, I think there's been a deferral from renewals work bank in CP6, but the current plans for the Platform 1 renewal are to take forward that work in years 2 and 4 of CP7. And again, once we work that through with the respective works contractors, we can share further detail. Next slide, please. So as I say, Network Rail is keen to work with partners on enhancement proposals, and I think I've tried to allude to at the start that really I think that's very much the focus we're going to have to take with other enhancement proposals. It's very difficult to make the case for funding in the constrained rail network enhancements pipeline, but working together with partners, we can leverage both that stakeholder and partner inputs to the strategic case, work with local politicians and national politicians. And Nottingham to Lincoln line speed is ultimately about working in and around the renewals of Swindeby and other parts of our network to enhance the line speed of the existing services that use that line. Network Rail have been working for Midlands Connect as a, as a development partner, and most recently, on advice from the DfT, to present a joint OBC FBC proposal. That's outline business case, final business case. We have prepared an estimate for the next stage of design, which Midlands Connect will be liaising with DfT to take forward. And clearly the maturing timescales around Swindeby allows us to understand when we need to be making decisions around that. But without preempting the decision of that programme board, I think it's important we think about understanding how a financial case may be made across a wider contribution space, depending on the availability of rail network enhancements, pipeline funding. Clearly, the work that East Midlands Railways referred to earlier is something that we would look to also link in with this. If we're looking at different service frequencies in the future, those benefits would be increased. G&G Sunday service. So I think this is ultimately something we need to work on further. I don't think our work looked definitively at providing the answers for this, and I must admit I think there are some myths that need to be dispelled. From what I understand, opening signal boxes is not the problem it once was, with the amount of services that have transferred to the Lincoln Control Centre. There is a challenge with maintenance, because clearly as a heavy utilised freight line, we need to have maintenance time within the timetable. But actually, I don't know if people have seen in the last control period, earlier this year, we've looked at pilots to work different times of the week, in midweek evenings, and that has some consequences, as in later services are terminated earlier and passengers have to use rail replacement buses. But I would say that across our strategic planning portfolio, we are really looking to understand how we can widen our revenue base. And as East Midlands Railway referred to earlier, leisure is a key growth area. I'm a resident of Spalding, and I used the service on Saturday, and I think clearly there is a demand there that will be likely to benefit from that service. So I think we need to work further with East Midlands Railway. It's not just an infrastructure cost. Those level crossing and signal box challenges could extend beyond the geography of the G&G itself, depending on where the fleet is coming from. But I think the work that East Midlands Railway referred to is a key opportunity. And I think, is that the last slide, or is there one more? I think really, just to finish, thank you again for the opportunity to speak. For me, probably the overarching point to take away for us is suggesting a further meeting with Jane, Midlands Connect, Transport for North, and thinking about the opportunities presented by the governance changes, the challenges we face as a sector. And I welcome the challenge by one of the councillors earlier to, are we spending money in the right place? One of the key things we're trying to do in our control period planning is not fall foul of renewing assets for the sake of renewing assets. There are always decisions to be made, depending on each individual decision, about whether spending or different means of achieving maintenance of those assets can be achieved over spending something else. And I think we need to do the same in enhancements. And I was interested to hear from Jane that there is a legacy of working together to potentially cross-subsidise local services. And I would note that from the little I understand of that, there is an element of trust that would be needed there in ensuring that there's a clear agreement between the parties, Network Rail, East Midlands Railway, DfT ultimately, around such an agreement. But I think that there's always an option to consider operational spending over capital spending, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. And I look forward to working with Lincolnshire and forward governance bodies as partners going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I ask members to speak, obviously you mentioned timetable for mayoral elections for Lincolnshire. The orders weren't laid, so hopefully your plans aren't solely centred around that, because we'll have to see what the timeline is going forward. But right, can I please ask members to be succinct, please, and questions, not statements, as we've got plenty on the agenda today. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make no apology, but I have got several. I'll split them down, if I may, into three particular sections. First of all, picking up on signalling and issues. Really pleased to see, to hear the confirmation that the issues with the Sunday service on the Spalding line are no longer down to opening up signal boxes. But I really, really do think that it will be bizarre if the collective mind of the rail industry cannot get a Sunday service on that railway within the next 5 years. It is perhaps a standing utter shame that after all of the money that's been spent upgrading that line to freight standards, upgrading the signalling, that there is still no longer a Sunday connection between three key towns in Lincolnshire.
Questions, please, Councillor Ashton.
We'll get there. So my question is, are we expecting a solution to that in 5 years or not? Also, what plans are there to upgrade signalling on the Poacher line between Sleaford and Skegness? And does the issue of Hubbards Bridge level crossing make that impossible to achieve? That's one area, please.
Well, first of all, just quickly on the Sunday services, what I was alluding to is my view is that the signal box opening factor is not as big a factor as it has been made out previously. I think what we need to do is get around the table and understand the facts. Like I said, it might not be limited to the geography, because if the services are coming from other parts of the network where there is operating costs, that could be a factor. You could say the same about other services on the Robin Hood line as well. So I think that key piece of work with East Midlands, looking at regional connectivity, is probably the place to take that. I mean, theoretically, I see no reason why you couldn't look at this question within a 5-year time frame. It's a good example of something that should be achievable. However, the factors around that, around driver availability and other factors, we need to get to the bottom of. And I'm very happy to take an action to work with Jane and the East Midlands colleagues on that. I couldn't give you a detailed answer for the Poacher line re-signalling. Certainly Hubbards Bridge is something that we reference and understand in our strategic advice, and I'd be happy to go away and take that question on where we're looking to do work going forward. But the piece of work that I referred to is an approach of looking at our business plan from the perspective of different value factors, not just renewing for the sake of renewing, is exactly the sort of reason why we want to input and understand more about these options before we make forward choices. So yeah, as far as I'm aware, it's not a key part of the CP7 plan, but I can clarify that through Jane and back to this group.
Thank you, and I appreciate the lonely job of the signalman on the poacher line, waiting for the few trains to come backwards and forwards. It can't be as exciting as it is in some parts of the network. Picking up on the hoped for improvement for the LNER connection to Cleethorpes, what plans are there, or has it been considered, to run potentially the first and last LNER service from Lincoln via the joint line to pick up Metheringham, Rushington, Sleaford and Spalding, instead of running via the East Coast Main Line? I appreciate that the East Coast Main Line has a plentiful service of trains, but if you're looking at new business, the population, I looked at this some time ago, the population of Metheringham, Rushington, Sleaford, Spalding equates to the same population of Grantham and Newark in terms of potential new business. Is that something that you're looking at factoring in? Is it something you could factor in? Because that would make a real difference to the access to a direct service to London for a lot of Lincolnshire.
Well, I'm quite a sympathetic personally. As I said, I live in Spalding. I think, as far as I'm aware, it's not the work that's been done by Network Rail to look at the Cleethorpes extension has been based on using the Nottingham to Lincoln line and joining the East Coast at Newark. There's no reason why we couldn't look at that question again. I think there are some challenges with the infrastructure, restrictive headways, section between Sleaford and Spalding. I guess ultimately we'd have to look at the bigger picture as well in terms of, I think your population challenge is a sensible one, and I think we could look at that. There clearly would be a disbenefit to calls for customers at Grantham and Newark. But again, I think it's probably one I'd have to think about. Clearly there's a challenge in getting the current East Coast proposition over the line, shall we say. So I'd be reluctant to make any firm commitments at the risk of complicating an already challenging position. But I think it's a valid question from a strategic planning perspective. And I'll look to take that away and understand if my colleagues who developed this work before I assumed the role have done any work on that. But I think there's certainly some value in that.
Thank you very much indeed. And my final area of questioning, really, really pleased to see the work that you've done around the proposal for Theddlethorpe. I'm delighted that your suggested route is coming up from the south. I'm assuming that having looked at the challenges of bringing a new rail line, effectively a new rail line through the northern wold, would come with a not just huge engineering problem, but area of outstanding natural beauty and so on. As part of your southern connection, would you be thinking in terms of reaching Mablethorpe via Louth, for instance? You talk about passenger route, passenger potential. Obviously, Louth is the one key town in the eastern bit of Lincolnshire without a railway line. It's what a lot of people have begged for a railway line to come back to Louth for a long, long time. But I appreciate Mablethorpe, Theddlethorpe sort of off to the side. Are you thinking of going up to Louth and across, or missing Louth?
I don't think the proposal presented in Siege of Ice includes Louth. But I think that's a good example again of how we can work with funders to understand the value of that. I think you're right to a certain extent. Those challenges coming from the north are exacerbated by some of the profile compared to the south. But also I think there's an element of economic modelling we did on what we thought the likely rail usage patterns would be. So again, I think it's one we could definitely consider at a later stage of development. And I think really for us at the moment, how can I put it, the work is perhaps on ice somewhat until the nuclear proposition goes forward further. Certainly if there's evidence and information about that's it's quite a stark point, but understood that Louth suffers from that lack of connectivity. We'd be keen to set that forward. I'd also think about that question posed around working with other transport providers on connectivity. Whatever happens with that proposal, it could be some years off. and if there are opportunities to work with partners on bus routes provision being improved to improve passenger in a more shorter term, then we'd be keen to explore that as well.
Is that it, Councillor Ashton? Yes, thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you for that. Just one question for myself, Tom, and that's regards to your vision slide. Now, I will keep it to one because I could ask questions about near enough every category on there, to be honest. I think there might be some tightening up needed on that vision, to be honest with you. But with the environmental sustainability, and I'd be quite happy for somebody to send something on later on this, but where it says we will become more resilient to the changes in weather, I find that to be a pretty sort of bland and all-encompassing statement. Bearing in mind my local station during the last lot of flooding was good for boating. You could boat at the line because it just filled up with water. So I'd be interested to know what is actually on the cards for making the network resilient to extremes of weather going forward, and whether you could send something on rather than try to answer that now. I'd much appreciate that.
Well, thank you for that clarification, because yes, I think in detail we'd have to take that one away. Where was your local station? Is your local station? Sorry.
Ruskington.
Ruskington. Yeah. So I think ultimately the work in CP7 is more about improving our day-to-day maintenance of the drainage network of the railway. A lot of that is also about working with partners, depending on where the outflows and inputs are coming into the water system from the Environment Agency and other partners of a similar nature, drainage boards as well in this area. There's been a significant commitment to further drainage engineer and maintenance activity in the CP7 plan. So I think the simple answer is there is a significant commitment within the CP7 plan to improve the highest risk areas of flooding. I think what I was alluding to in the longer term is thinking about the vulnerability of coastal routes or other areas to longer term climate trends. And again, speaking from a non-specialist environmental perspective, I think again that's about considering the wider investment portfolio we have. So, for example, where there's been investment in Boston Barrier, other local flood infrastructure schemes, the answer may not always lie with rail to spend money that has a wider benefit. And of course, then you could take it further, and if certain communities become isolated and less viable, and there's longer term changes, you'd have to look at that in the round. So happy to look at a colleague in East Midlands route, perhaps to speak about the shorter term drainage work, and likewise that longer term piece. But I really see that as working with key partners, much in a similar way that in Spalding, probably less environmental per se, but with level crossings, we need to think about how the road investment proposals can benefit that. And it will be challenging for Network Rail to provide a direct funding contribution. Typically, those types of opportunities arise when we can close level crossing, which I don't think would be viable in the case of Windsor Road and Park Road. But I think working with partners on what is going to be limited funding, whether it is the timescales that you mentioned, goes without saying that we'd obviously be working with yourselves, Lincolnshire in any case, however the governance plays out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no other questions, so thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Nothing to add, Jamie, before I move this on? Okay. Right, I move that the committee notes the updates provided by Network Rail and East Midlands Rail on rail infrastructure plans, service enhancements and challenges in meeting stakeholder aspirations for improved connectivity and capacity in Lincolnshire, and that the committee recommends that relevant LCC officers and portfolio holders work proactively with relevant authorities and stakeholders to ensure that Lincolnshire's rail connectivity requirements are adequately represented and prioritised in broader regional transport plans such as the Network North Initiative and the Midlands Rail Hub Scheme. And could add to that the fact that we were offered from Mr Selby to come back to us with answers on questions from today, and whilst Councillor Ashton made a good suggestion that there perhaps would be a meeting with somebody else that could come to see us, that I wouldn't want to wait for that meeting for those answers. So if we could send the questions off and get replies back to this committee and obviously to the resident officers and the portfolio holder. With that in mind, can I have that proposed, please? Councillor Vernon, seconded. Councillor Rawlings, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Right, I'm sure you're really keen to see the rest of this meeting through, Tom. But right, we had at this point scheduled in a 10-minute break if people needed it, but we've got a pretty long agenda here. So, does anybody actually want the break, or shall we move on with the agenda? Carry on. Right, that's the only answer I got, so we'll carry on. Right. Item 7 then is the winter service plan. This pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 37 to 108 of the agenda pack. The report outlines the proposed amendments to the winter service plan for 24-25, ensuring alignment with national guidance and best practices. A decision is due to be taken by the Executive Council of Highways, Transport and IT between the 17th and 28th of June. It's asked we consider the report and determine whether we support recommendations to the Executive Councillor, and that we agree any additional comments be passed to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Claire Dixon, Policy and Asset Manager.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides the committee with the background information on the Council's winter service plan for 2024 to 25. The winter service plan documents the robust policies, procedures and standards against which the Council fulfils its statutory duties in relation to snow and ice and otherwise manages its winter service. The plan covers gritting of the highway network during winter conditions, covering an operational period of the 1st of October to the 30th of April, with provisions to extend beyond those dates if required. During this period, our trained staff will monitor weather forecasts and weather conditions on a 24-hour basis, and this will enable treatment decisions to be tuned to changing winter weather conditions. Our winter service operations will give priority to a 3,018 kilometre network of priority routes, and details of these routes can be found on our website. All treatments shall be carried out using appropriate action for the prevailing conditions in accordance with national guidance and best practice. A system of local weather stations will be operated and used both to feed into the weather forecast model and to monitor local conditions, and a professional forecasting service will be used to guide treatment decisions. We own and use 12 roadside weather stations around the county, and these weather stations are positioned so that there are sufficient weather stations in each of Lincolnshire's 6 weather domains. Salt and grit bins will be provided and maintained on request if the location meets the criteria as set out in Appendix C, page 81 of the report, and a responsible body undertakes to spread salt and or grit where necessary and inform the network resilience team when it needs refilling. These bins are provided on a self-help basis to local communities to treat known local trouble spots on the public highway not covered by the priority route network. We undertake to provide limited amounts of additional salt and or grit in 1-ton sacks to parish councils at agreed locations on request or during summer following a severe winter. To ensure we have sufficient resources for our winter service operations, we will provide the following as a minimum: 43 frontline gritters, 4 spare gritters, 47 snow ploughs, 8 operational centres at which gritters and salt supplies will be based, and at the start of each winter season there will be a minimum of 25,000 tonnes of salt in stock. The Council will aim to manage the carriageway so that the public can travel safely and with minimal disruption or delay, and we will do what is reasonably possible to ensure that the strategic routes remain open to public use. The plan is updated annually in line with the Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Plan, which sets out the policy and procedures for the winter service. At Appendix B and on page 93 of your report pack, you'll find the statistics for the winter service. Service level demand for the past couple of years. For 22-23, we had 68 salt-in turnouts using approximately 18,500 tonnes of salt. For 23-24, we had 51 salting turnouts where we used approximately 12,100 tonnes of salt. I am joined today by my colleague Darryl Redford, Network Resilience Manager. He does have some additional statistics and is able to answer any questions at the end of this report. An annual review has been undertaken and there are no proposed policy changes. However, there are some minor operational changes and clarifications recommended for 2024. These include the removal of information regarding budgets being based on an average winter. References to fleet services have been removed, and the local highways team have been removed as a point of contact for network resilience, which did form part of the update process from the forecast service provider. The reference of snow room has been amended to instant response room to align with our operational procedures, and the instant plan report, which is agreed between network resilience and the contractor, shall be done so after each instant rather than at the end of each shift. Section 3.14 of the Winter Service Plan and page 76 of your report has also been updated to show that the mutual aid arrangements form part of the Lincolnshire Resilience Forum as part of multi-agency response. The report invites the Executive Councillor for Highways and Transport to approve the plan as attached to Appendix A of this report, and the Winter Service Plan for 2024 will then become operational from the 1st of October 2024. Alternatives will be not to approve this plan, which could then affect the arrangements and preparations to deliver the winter service. And just to note that we will also be delivering an interim winter service report to provide a mid-season update, and this shall be presented to the Scrutiny Committee on the 27th of January 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Councillor Brooks first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of things that I've got. Thank you for the report, good report, and it is, I note, tweaks on the previous winter service plan, which has been through this committee before. As I say, there's a couple of things I just wanted to ask about. We talk about the mutual aid, section 314 in the plan. I noticed that reference to bags of salt going to parish councils has been removed. It was in last year's plan and it's not in this year's plan. We talk about engaging with parish and town councils, but don't specifically mention the ton bag of grit. And it's something that is valued by parish councils and town councils, that is available, and it's often referred to throughout the year at parish council meetings, the fact that they get that. So I'm just a bit concerned that that's disappeared out of this year's plan. And the other question I'd got was on route optimisation and the reference to the ongoing project, looking at the roads that might be out of the policy scope, etc. And I just... We previously said at this committee about having member involvement with that process, and again I'd just like the comfort of knowing that it's still intended to have member input and involvement when that comes to the fore. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. The paragraph with regards to the 1 tonne salt sacks has actually just been moved in the document. It's now at 2.10.8 on page 58.
Oh, right, I missed that then. I looked at the changes and I said I went to which I do find that useful, in paragraph 2, proposed changes. Tend to look through that and go and look at what the changes are. I didn't realise that had been moved to another section because it wasn't referred to there as a change, so that's fine as long as it's there.
Yeah, and Councillor Brooks, in relation to the other route optimisation work, we are working as quickly as possible in the background to make sure we get that, just testing what we can do in the background, looking at optimising our routes. That's underway. We are looking for sort of an informal member engagement just to develop that over the next 12 months, and it is for the winter service plan for the one after next. So we believe we've got enough time, and it'll be an action for me to reach out and make sure we arrange that.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you. Could you advise me why Coningsby and Tattershall seem to be missed off of the Appendix A main villages in Lincolnshire on page 77. I appreciate just looking down the list there at places like Ragby, Sibsey, Stickney. If they're on the list, I'm just wondering why Coningsby and Tattershall are not. And just on that same basis, I appreciate we have arrangements in place with the NHS and other authorities. Do we have anything in place with the RAF appreciating the airbase at Coningsby? And I assume the need to maintain access to that. Thank you.
The airbase for Coningsby is covered on our main gritting routes, as are all the others in the county. As far as Coningsby and Tattershall, we're just checking the document. They should be in, so thank you for picking that up. We'll make those changes. Sorry about that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley Morris.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Brooks actually covered what I wanted to ask.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rawlings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a more minor matter, but our colleague referred to the provision and filling of grit bins in isolated communities. I have an issue on one of my very small villages where a main drain runs through the village and it on an absolutely hairpin, sort of, or partially hairpin bend, highly dangerous. We have a local children's home just down the road, and the workers there seem to manage to whiz round there and end up with the wheels over the embankment of the drain on a regular basis. Now, there was a grit bin there. We have a lot of very elderly residents in the village who have got past doing that sort of thing, but there is some concern about the younger residents about putting the grit out if it's ineffective, and then we end up with a fatality or some very nasty accident on the bow of this bridge, which has happened on more than one occasion, as people will not control the speed. So I just wondered about the community liability on that, if we have any information.
As far as community liability for spreading salt from a salt bin, as that is seen as a community-spirited exercise, there is no legal duty against them. So there has been no claim or no court case involving grit bin spreading. As long as you're not doing anything silly like putting hot water down and then letting it freeze, you're just using the salt out of the bin, there is no liability against the member of the public doing it. It's seen as a community action.
Thank you for that, although I don't think the poor drivers in question tend to blame the local residents for not putting the grit down properly. So there we go, that's good to clarify that, thank you.
Thanks. I think that's. I think a lot of parishes know that as well. I know it's vexed a lot of parish councils, but they got the answer about 2 years ago. So, yeah.
There is obviously a legal requirement for us as a service to do it properly. That is the only legal requirement.
Councillor Strangle.
Thank you, Chairman. I think most of the damage to the roads is caused by the frost after a winter, especially a severe winter. Not so much snow, but I think the frost is the one. We've heard the term for the summer beach-ready body. I'm not referring to myself here, Chairman, obviously. But what about winter-ready roads? Whether you use the word precautionary quite a lot in here. Is there any way, because you can see that some of the roads that get damaged by severe frost actually occur in the same places quite a lot of the time, or I've noticed that anyway. I noticed especially on the A46 between Lincoln and Newark, actually. Is there any way that we can perhaps identify areas that could be susceptible to actually severe frost damage, or is that too difficult to do? And if so, is there any precaution you could take to actually preempt a severe winter of frost and road damage? Thank you.
To answer your question, obviously frost damage is due to water ingress into a fault or a crack in the road that's already there, and then it being freezing and thawing and expanding and contracting, and that's what causes the issue. Obviously, we'd have to identify if there is a fault in the road with cracking or allowing water ingress into that system. As far as making a road winter ready, I am unsure of if there is any material that we can use or anything like that. I'd have to investigate on that one and talk to my local highways officers on that issue. As I say, it's not my area of expertise, unfortunately. What was the second question? There was a second element.
More about identifying areas that seem to be damaged more and more each year. Whether there is any way they can be identified, that sort of thing.
I'll hand over to John on that one, John Evans.
Yeah, happy to take that question. In terms of what we do as a highway service, we're always trying to react in terms of conditions. So our highways officers are out there doing safety inspections, but we're also doing, as I'll report in my item number 11, I think later on, the condition of the highway. We're always looking for it as it evolves. Some areas of our network deteriorate slower than others. We've recently adopted some AI technology, Visala AI, that's mapping the road network as we drive it around with our cameras. That's just looking for deterioration, cracking of different types, and we use that to sort of inform us. And every year we're reprioritising our scheme selection, whilst we've got a programme for 3 to 5 years ahead of ourselves. Based on the latest condition data, we sort of reshuffle. So we're always looking to try and capture the highway asset that's in the worst condition prior to winter, and one of the best techniques for that is preventative maintenance, so stuff like surface dressing, micro slurry treatments on top of an existing surface will ensure that water ingress is stopped, and so it just doesn't deteriorate further during the winter. There's obviously lots to go at in Lincolnshire. We try and do our best, but sometimes we may get it wrong, so yeah, that's probably the best answer I can give at the moment.
Councillor Tyrrell.
Thank you, Chair. You said earlier that you put these bins out where, if we want them, is there a certain road you won't supply a bin, and is it the parish council that actually asks for these, or councillors or anybody? Thank you.
It is obviously in the parish council is the main people that request these. We look really for a professional body that can come back to us and keep us informed about them need to be refilled and look after them for us. And the parish council is usually the best element to do that. Though we will take requests from other areas as well. As far as roads that we will not put a grip bin on, there is nothing. Though we will tend to shy away from putting them on roads that we're already gritting. We will only put a grit bin in if there's an additional issue, such as runoff from the roads or a drainage issue that we're aware of that needs possible further salting after we've gone through, and that the water is a problem, flowing water being a problem on the network. So I wouldn't say no to everything, but we do have a criteria, obviously, that we look at shaded areas, corners and things like that, and deep ditches to the side where there could be an issue of if a car comes off where there could be an issue. So they have a priority when we put them out. I think we've got to be aware we've got over 2,000 grip bins in the county, which is a considerable number, and keeping those filled and ready over a winter, particularly a bad winter, is a big exercise.
No further questions? Just a quick one for myself then. With regards to where it mentions value for money improvements, like for instance owning the gritters, there's no mention then of any potential impacts. Obviously there's all the associated issues that then go with owning, such as maintenance and repair. So have we done anything to make sure that we don't compromise the effectiveness and timeliness of the operations going forward based on ownership?
Yes, I mean, one of the things we've got with the new gritters is we've got the ability to now regulate our own maintenance plans, whereas before we were tied into what we got with by the contractors. One thing we are doing, we always do a summer overhaul, obviously, to gritters. They're all in now, having their summer break and getting massaged and sun lamps and all that. Yeah, beach ready for the winter. But also we are looking at internal movement of vehicles, the ones that do more routes and higher mileage being pastured out to lesser routes, and moving those gritters into different gritters around and rotating those. We're also looking at mid-life overhauls as well, to spend a little money to invest to get more out of those gritters and a longer term out of them. So there is many things that we are now looking at and being able to push further now that we own those gritters. We've also got to remember that maintenance has always been there, so we've always been paying for it. So it's just now how angling it at a better way and getting more for our buck, bigger bang for our buck. So that's what we're looking at the moment.
Do you want to come back, Jonathan?
Yeah, really quick one. I just think it's worth the Highways Transportation Scrutiny Committee being aware that since drafting the report, the leasing company Go Plan has gone into administration. So that's the seven gritters that were hired. What the Highway Service did whilst that company was getting wound up was purchase 3 of them. So we've taken that, we've de-risked that element, and we've placed a direct order for the purchase of 4 more. So we brought forward that leasing so that prior to winter, the coming winter, it'll be a fully LCC-owned stock. Just thought I'd update there, and just some of activity that went on that happened before this, whilst this document was being drafted.
Thank you for that. Okay, if there are no further questions then. No? Okay. I move that the committee supports the proposed recommendations as they are set out on page 39 of the report, and I ask that the comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Council for consideration ahead of the decision being made between 17th to 28th of June. And within those comments, obviously there was potential issue of missing maps, and also the ongoing consideration of member involvement in road prioritising. Okay. So do I have a seconder? Councillor Strengle. All those in favour? I think that's unanimous, isn't it? Yep, that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, if we move then to item 8, which is Parking Enforcement Procedures Manual. The next pre-decision scrutiny report on our agenda can be found on pages 109 to 190. We're considering a draft report which sets out various amendments to the existing Parking Enforcement Procedures Manual. A decision is due to be taken by the Executive Council for Highways, Transport and IT between 17th and 24th of June. It is asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support recommendations to the Executive Councillor, and that we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to these items. The report will be presented by Matt Jones, Parking Services Manager. Matt, please.
Good morning, thank you, Chair. The report starts on page 118, but it is a good 55 pages long, so I won't go through every page, but I'll try and extract some of the key points that are detailed within it. Ultimately, the purpose of the document is to provide guidance and to help motorists in their in their intention on where to park, how to park correctly throughout the county, and what we do as a service to try and enhance that experience, and what the process is in place to deliver the parking service itself. Ultimately, we undertake our enforcement in a fair but firm manner. That's both when we're undertaking enforcement activity on street, but also in our back office as well. So that includes handling telephone calls, inquiries, and an appeals process that's in place for anyone that could be issued with a penalty charge or that may have an inquiry regarding the service itself. Goes into a lot more detail about that, but as I said, I'm just trying to extract some of the key points from there. We'll always try and attempt to issue penalty charges right first time, always looking to investigate everyone's comments that they may have across the service, and publishing our data and statistics on the council's website is one of our kind of key points to almost show that we're very open and transparent with the work that we do, the work that we deliver, and how that it's shown within each area across the county is then displayed through interactive maps and various data sets that we've got online. Fundamentally, civil parking enforcement is in place to reduce traffic, to enhance visitors' experience, create turnover of limited waiting parking bays, providing access for those with a disability who are in possession of a valid blue badge. So ensuring that we visit key areas across the county is important for us to make sure that the parking spaces are there for use for as many people as possible. So the document explains in quite a lot of detail about what parking restrictions are. This can go or ranges from the meaning of double yellow lines, what we can do on them as a motorist, so loading and unloading is permitted, dropping off pedestrians, passengers from a vehicle, allowing someone to alight into the vehicle as well. So a lot of detail about how and why restrictions are in place and what the meanings of them actually are. Our officers will enforce the restrictions, as I said earlier, in a fair but firm manner. So there's a very set guidelines that are available to officers in line with legislation that we undertake our duties from. So we enforce all on-street restrictions throughout the county and a number of off-street car parks in our coastal areas, Anderby Creek, Huttoff, Car Terrace, for example, as well. There are some elements which still remain the jurisdiction of the police. Obstruction, for example, falls within the jurisdiction of the police still. So we'll always try and advise motorists in terms of what we can do, but also what we may not be able to assist with, and the relevant channels that are available to the public to report matters such as that. The officers themselves will follow not just the legislation that we have in place, but our own guidelines, our own observation periods relative to each type of parking instance that can occur. Like I said earlier on, loading and unloading is permitted off of a yellow line in a loading bay. So we have grace periods in place that allow motorists to do that and to carry out that activity for local shops, businesses, etc. In terms of the actual penalties themselves, they're set at two rates, of one at £50, which is the lower level contravention, and the higher level contravention of £70. These are both discounted by 50% if they're paid within 14 days. And upon an issue of a penalty charge, a motorist will always have the opportunity to challenge the penalty if they feel it's either been issued incorrectly or there's valid grounds that may justify the cancellation of that charge itself. So the process is in place as per legislation in terms of the actual appeal process, and our notice processing team will handle all items of correspondence relative to that. If penalties remain unpaid, the process is followed for recovery. A number of letters are sent to the registered keeper of the vehicle, which we obtain from the DVLA. And again, if there's non-payment, the process continues until the penalty is either recovered in full via a payment to the authority, or the matter is passed across to an enforcement agent to recover the debt for the council. Part of the appeals process also includes the opportunity to challenge via an independent parking adjudicator. So this is a group of lawyers based within the Traffic Penalty Tribunal. So if again someone did feel that a penalty was issued either incorrectly or those valid grounds were presented, however the council, we felt that sufficient grounds weren't presented, then a member of the public or motorist can actually challenge via someone independent from the council who will review the matter from scratch, look at the rationale behind issuing and the arguments from the motorist point of view for the challenge, and then form a decision from there. Again, the document kind of goes into a bit more detail about that whole process itself. We, again, are very open about how we manage the service from an appeals perspective. We always accept that some penalty charge notices will be cancelled. People will have valid grounds that justify cancellations, and we identify a number of potentials within the document itself: loading and unloading. A pay and display ticket may have fallen onto the floor of a vehicle, or a blue badge may have been partially obscured. So all elements within this where we're very open about how we can offer discretion is detailed within the manual itself. We also accept that some motorists may wish to propose a payment plan in regards to penalties, so we'll always consider it about individual circumstances, and we look at how we can manage that as per part of an appeals process as well. The discretion side of things rests pretty much solely with the back office. So once a penalty's been issued on street, the enforcement officer cannot do anything with that ticket. They can add notes to the system, they can add more details and explanations if there's more evidence has come to light after the event, but fundamentally that is handled in the notice processing team afterwards. A big portion of the document, or of the manual, again kind of identifies where we may give permissions for vehicles to park on the network as well. So we issue parking waivers or dispensations, which allows someone to park on a restriction if there's a specific need to access a property. For example, if there's building works going on directly next to where the vehicle was required to be parked and constant access to that vehicle was required, there's a process in place that we can assist with that via an application process. Similar for parking bay suspensions as well. So there could be an event, or there could be works being undertaken on the highway that require a stretch of parking bays to be suspended, and we manage that process as well in conjunction with kind of colleagues in our highways teams. Moving further down into the document, we identify that we manage from Lincolnshire County Council resident permit schemes. We have schemes in place in Sleaford, Louth, Stamford and Grantham, all of which are a virtual permit system where a resident can apply for a permit, and the handheld device that the officer is utilising when on street will flag up with the relevant information as to parking rights. The City of Lincoln administer the Lincoln's permit scheme, which is still a physical permit, so we will always check for permits or any type of document that shows that there's a permission given from the City of Lincoln to park in the resident permit bays in the city. Towards the end of the document, we list all of the different contraventions that can be issued. So there's a large number, all of which have different grace periods depending upon the severity of them. A disabled bay, for example, if a vehicle is parked within it with no badge on display, a ticket can be issued instantly. However, if a vehicle is parked in a loading bay, then there may not be someone actively seen at that precise moment, but we'll give an observation to ensure that the activity is witnessed and seen. So all of these guidelines are what the enforcement officers follow, and the overall intention of the manual is to be to treat it as a guide for motorists that can access the document if they wish to, and provide information as to what we do and how we undertake the parking enforcement service. It was last updated, I think 8-9 years ago, so we're due for an update. The updates are, or the alterations are listed as Appendix B on page 174. So there's 2 or 3 pages there of what the updates themselves can entail. But on the whole, that's in a quick snapshot nutshell the manual itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions or comments? Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chairman. The old chestnut I've been bringing up for many years, 5.25. It's a complete waste of time ringing up the police, telling them about an obstruction, because all they'll say is it's down to the county council, ring them. They've said this to many, many residents, and residents just don't bother anymore. So that'll be ongoing for years, I should think. 3.1, resident parking. I understand Lincoln has 17 resident areas, and there's another rather large area being put forward. Will this mean the county will undertake more enforcement officers? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, in terms of obstruction, I completely appreciate what you've said. I've heard it myself as well, where unfortunately incorrect advice has been given to the public. We've worked with the police in the past to try and explain and reinforce exactly what we can do. I know that there has been nationally a big push to tackle pavement parking issues, and there is still, I think there was a consultation a good 3 years ago now where discussions were had and opportunities were put forward from an array of groups and authorities to explain how an authority may be able to assist with that moving forward. So we're still awaiting the outcome from government on it, but I understand your point in terms of obstruction. In terms of the resident parking, yes, we've obviously there was a recent expansion of the Lincoln zone, Sinsel Bank area, and we were very careful with how we've enforced that specific location, because we don't want to take officers from other areas of the city to cover another scheme and potentially leave other areas open to abuse and non-compliance. So we have to manage the resource extremely carefully. We look at what requirement is needed. So we survey the area first and foremost to ascertain how many vehicles are actually parking in a non-compliant manner, what tickets are issued from that, is there compliance there. So potentially, if there was a vast expansion covering a huge number of areas, then we would have to look at the resource that we have, because we couldn't potentially manage that and the rest of the city with the existing staff. So yes is the answer, but we would obviously need to work with City of Lincoln on that as well.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Matt, for the report. It's a good report. The document is extremely easy to read, I find, and just one little criticism. I read through it all and I kept wondering, because it is an update, what the changes were. And right on the last page, I get Appendix B, changes to the document, and I just wondered, is there any way of making a reference to the changes to this document or in Appendix B at the end, so that if you would like to, you can go there, find out what the changes are, and then go back and check them out if you're previously familiar with the document. But and the other thing I'd like to mention is grace periods, and particularly with no parking outside of schools when traffic regulation orders are put in outside of schools. I just to say to everybody, if you get proposals for no parking, traffic regulations or orders outside of schools, make sure there is a no loading, unloading part of that, because if the yellow line, if you just have yellow lines without no loading, unloading, they have to be observed for a period of time, parking there and causing a real problem before the enforcement officer can give them a ticket. And with parking unsafely outside of schools, interfering with school crossing patrols and things like that, you know, there shouldn't be any grace at all. They shouldn't be parked there. And so I'm just saying to everybody, because I recently had one go through a school in my division, thought, great, that's going to solve it. School crossing patrol, and then people start parking there, knowing full well that the enforcement officer has got to give them a period of grace before they can give them a ticket. So I just think that's worth everybody knowing. And that's it. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you want to come back on that, Matt?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Brooks. In terms of schools, I understand with zigzag markings, so keep clear markings, an instant contravention, so there is no observation period required. For the yellow lines, which are, say, adjacent or either side of a zigzag, that's where potentially there's an observation period that can take place. So you're right in what you're saying in terms of a loading ban that stops blue badge holders from parking on yellow lines. It stops loading and unloading, and it's an instant contravention. Whereas without a ban on loading, so just a single yellow or a double yellow line, we would have to observe a vehicle to allow someone to load and unload. If they were, taking items into the school, for example, or whatever it may be, then yeah, there's an observation period. So I understand your comment on that.
Councillor Vernon.
Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you, Chairman. It's one small observation, and nobody else may think it's valid, but on page 127, you talk about the pay-by-phone tariff and ensuring you purchase the appropriate time, which is obviously really useful advice. Can we add in about checking the number plate as well? Because I, unfortunately, did get a parking ticket because I used the wrong vehicle. So, obviously, hands up, that was my fault entirely. But I think it's one of those things now where, in all seriousness, it's simple just to put the wrong digit in. So, I wonder if it is perhaps worth including that as part of the guidance as well. Thank you.
Yes, completely fine. We can add that in. Thank you.
Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just picking up on and completely agree with the point raised by Councillor Brooks. What is the evidence base that's required in order to introduce loading and unloading restrictions? Is there a threshold that has to be met? Is there a process that has to be gone through? Or is this simply that can be brought forward as part of the usual TRO process? And the reason I pick up on that is that we could perhaps do, not wishing to prejudice what may come out of the current working group that's taking place. That working group may, I think, I will be speaking to the chairman after this meeting to see if we can just get a little bit more around your loading restrictions into that group. But I'm very keen on a personal basis to see us take a uniform approach across Lincolnshire, that wherever we're introducing TROs to tackle parking outside of schools, we do them to the most enforceable standard. Because like Councillor Brooks was saying, any crack in that enforceability makes it really, really difficult to try and I mean, my view is that double yellow lines should be no parking. There's no point in having double yellow lines if you're allowing parking of any kind. But if there is a means of doing that through loading restrictions, then that feels to be a good place to land.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Ashton. Yes, I mean, it would be part of the TRO process. From the parking services side, we enforce, we don't implement or administer or implement the new restrictions or an adjustment or an amendment, but it's certainly something that could very well be picked up at that early stage because of the knock-on effects further down the line. So yeah, it could very well be that it's something that could be looked at as a separate entity on its own merits, and being uniform potentially throughout the county could very well be beneficial. Appreciate that there could be individual circumstances for each area, but yeah, certainly something to look at.
Thank you. Any further questions now? Just a quick one, Max. We were getting a bit behind now. I noticed in the guidance it gives quite clear information about, you know, people forget they park on the verge. They think that means they're not parked on the double yellow lines. And obviously people are going to have to work out from this whether they know whether it's highway or not, which is obviously a little bit unclear. But it doesn't mention anywhere cycle lanes. So I know a particular area near a school where there's no verge, so they just blatantly park in the cycle lane or completely block the cycle lane, and that's not mentioned at all. Is that because of some legality over cycle lanes, or is it just not mentioned?
No, not at all. We enforce cycle lanes, mandatory cycle lanes, so I can ensure that there's an addition made to the manual itself to explain the, you know, kind of the impact that that can have as well, and what we can do as from an enforcement perspective. So that can be added to the manual itself.
I was going to say something now, because I know somebody said I'm going to take my cycle then all the way down, his trick cycle all the way down, all the parked cars. I said, I don't think you can quite go that far. We'll talk about enforcement first. Okay, right, if there aren't any further questions, then I move that the committee supports the proposed recommendations as that set out on page 111 of the report. I ask the comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Council for consideration ahead of the decision being made between 17th to 24th of June, and obviously within those considerations are the questions that have been raised about cycle lanes. I think Councillor Clark would like it to be mentioned again about the resourcing of enforcement. I think it's something that we share across the piece, that we often wonder if there is enough enforcement within the resources that are available. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Brooks, thank you. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We now move then to item 9, which is the North Highcombe Relief Road Compulsory Purchase Order and Side Roads Order. The next pre-discussion scrutiny report on our agenda can be found on pages that's the wrong one. It's got the same numbers again. The same numbers again there, Tom. Excuse me, but there's a misprint on my agenda, so. Can be found following on from the last report. We are considering a draft report which sets out the various amendments to the existing parking enforcement. Right, we are considering a draft report set out the various amendments to the North Highcombe Relief Road Compulsory Purchase Order and Side Roads Order. A decision is due to be made, as I said previously. It is asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support recommendations to the Executive, and we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Sam, as not in my agenda. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you. Right, well, first of all, you'll be happy. I appreciate the time in the meeting. I won't go through what includes the appendices, the 367 pages. So I'll summarise. It's I suppose in summary, it's a paper seeking legal approval of the process. So if you remember, I came to this committee probably 3 or 4 months ago now, seeking approval that went through to Executive to prepare the orders. That was approved, and that's what we've been doing the last 3 or 4 months, is preparing those legal orders. On the 13th of May, Planning and Res Committee, the North Highcombe Relief Road achieved planning permission, so it meant you can move on to the next phase, which is effectively publishing the orders. This is what this paper now covers. It's the second half of that legal paper. So we use that time to prepare the orders. Now we're nearing the point of publishing them. So this delegation includes it's what's called making the compulsory purchase orders, and making the side roads orders, making the statement of reasons, and making the statement of case. It then delegates the Executive Director of Place and the Executive Portfolio Holder for Highways and Transport to issue those at the right time. Also delegates the Chief Legal Officer for sealing those documents in their final form. And then finally also gives the approvals to actually go through the financial elements and the completion of land acquisition. So the relief hasn't changed. I guess that's the way to stress since that point. In fact, it's become more galvanised in the fact that it's secure planning permission in its current state, and now this really grants us the legal approval to publish those orders, which is one of the requirements we need to secure the land. From a timeline perspective, we would look to do that as soon as possible following an executive approval if one is given. And that will mean that there's opens an objection process or praise, you never know. If there are any statutory objections, it will result in the need for a public inquiry, which was difficult to determine timelines at this, but that would likely be spring next year, by the time that the planning inspector has gone through that. That will go through its own process. If the scheme continues to progress through that, the next process then is the final business case with the DFT, and then forming contracts and start. So we're still looking, with a fair wind and everything going through this programme, for starting works towards the end of next year, which actually is not that long when you think about it on this scale of scheme. So quite an exciting next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Questions? Councillor Strangle?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, very encouraged by the progress on this road, and it'll be great when there is a full ring road around Lincoln. That will benefit the people within the Lincoln boundaries as well as those outside. Just one little concern. I noticed in the earlier report when we were talking about the winter conditions, we were talking about 3,000 plus kilometres of roads. And now we're talking about 120 kilometre per hour dual all-purpose two-lane carriageway. Why are we going to kilometres and kilometres per hour? For goodness sake, we've left the European Union. We should be British. It should be miles. Can I just get that corrected? If not, I will hold my peace. Thank you, Chair.
I don't think we'll call Sam to comment on leaving the European Union. Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Clark.
Sam, just out of curiosity, you said that if there was objections, how many objections would be enough to halt it?
So it can be, it's not down to ourselves to make that decision, it's down to the planning inspector at PINS who make that decision. It is usually a minimum of one statutory objector can cause the need for a public inquiry. There are non-statutory objectors which don't trigger that same thing, but if you get a collection of people around the same sort of issue, the planning inspector can make a decision that because there's so much, I guess, noise around that, they can also form the need for an inquiry. What I should stress, though, is if there is an objection, of course, the authority would have the ability to talk to that objector and to see if they would move it, if what's causing it, why, what the concerns are, and that's what we would do in that intervening period, which is what we've done on various other schemes like Cannock Hill. When there was objections there for that scheme, we removed those. We also did the same thing for Welton Roundabout, but when we did those, so we would work towards that. So it depends on the scale of the objection, but yes, to answer your question, it can be just one statutory objector. Actually, just before I go on, can I just add to that? It's worth commenting that the planning application for a scale of the scheme of this nature received very few objections. And it's worth stressing that. And that's not to say there aren't concerns from various parties, but the scale of what the project we are doing, the number of objections that we did receive, and most of them were removed before the inquiry, the statutory ones, I would just reiterate that this is a well-supported scheme.
Okay, thanks for that. Just a couple from me, Sam. One is about the cost. We've got it costed, according to the report, 193.9 million, and now that's made up of various contributions. We've got a little thing called a general election going on at the moment, so if there are any differences, as in any rising costs, how are we mitigating that? Where would we look to actually make sure that we meet those costs if they do rise? and the other one is with regards to the Section 6 agreement and any minor technical amendments. At what stage are they considered, and what safeguards are in place to make sure that there's no real major change or timeline variation that takes us out of scope.
Okay, the funding one is a very difficult one. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty. What I will start with is that I've had, through all my conversations with the DFT, there was no noise, there was no insinuation of any funding cut or descaling or anything like that. And it's also worth stressing that the planning permission we have is for a dual carriageway, 70 miles an hour road. And it can't be simply just changed. You would have to go back to the drawing board as far as the business case. With regards to the funding envelope, although our most likely cost at this stage is 193, there is a range that goes broader than that. That's a lower range and a higher range. Now that incorporates costs that we think could happen going through, but opportunities and costs that could impact that. And part of that would be inflation, and there is a level of inflation attached to these values. It is near on impossible to predict something like a COVID impact or a war in Ukraine sort of impact or that type of thing, but there is flexibility in that. But as far as the budget allocation at this time, there is 110 million from the DFT, and the remaining comes from Lincolnshire County Council, which is in the budget statement. If more was needed, then that would be a decision for the County Council to make as whether they would fill that or take different decisions. As far as the Section 6 agreement, just for those, Section 6 is, if you think about you may know Section 278 allows a developer to come onto the County Council highway network. Section 6 within the highway that effectively lets the County Council as a highway authority go onto the trunk road network. Similar sort of relationship. We have started, the legal document is fairly straightforward, it's fairly standard, that's not a problem. But in order to sign that, all the technical details need to be approved between the County Council and National Highways. We've had a number of productive meetings over the last month, and in advance of planning, we were in extensive dialogue with National Highways, hence why there was no objection to the planning application. Now, clearly we need to go through the final elements of those details, but we were so far progressed with the planning permission already that those aren't scary, I suppose. They're quite well defined already. The only issue of not having the Section 6 beforehand is that's an impediment to the scheme because we can't get onto that land. That shouldn't derail this process of publishing the orders to go through the approval. In the meantime, we're doing that in tandem. So there's a level of risk, but with the conversations and the collaborative working that we've had with National Highways for about 3 years now on this scheme, it's not a significant risk in my mind at this stage.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, if there are no further questions then or comments, I move that the committee supports the proposed recommendation as these are set out on pages 193 and 194 of the report, and I ask that the comments raised by the committee be shared with the executive for its consideration ahead of the decision being made after the 2nd of July. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Strengle, all those in favour? And that's carried. Okay, item 10 is the Hawthorne Road Shared Footway, Cycleway and Hawthorne Road Little Cherry Footway Access Renewal. This final pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 217 to 230 of the agenda pack. This report seeks approval for the construction of a new shared footway stroke cycleway and the renewal of the footway access onto Hawthorne Road. Hawthorne Road is a strategic link connecting Cherry Willingham and nearby villages to the new Lincoln Eastern Bypass and Lincoln East. It is recommended to the Executive Councillors to approve the scheme, which is part of the Lincoln Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. A decision is due to be taken by the Leader of Council, Executive Council of Resources, Communications and Commissioning, and the Executive Council for Highways, Transport and IT on the 17th of June 2024. It is asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support recommendations to the Executive Councillors and that we agree on additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Council in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Sam Edwards. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a a relatively simple, straightforward high-risk scheme, but a really impactful one in a positive way, obviously. So this particular footway along Hawthorne Road between Cherry Willingham and the Lincoln Eastern Bypass was due for maintenance anyway. But at the same time, there's a development taking place nearby which has £85,000 of Section 106 attached to it. So we looked through a slightly different lens, and actually the footfall that's been through there since the Eastern Bypass has been constructed has increased, which is fantastic, and links the community of sort of the Carlton Estate and Bunkers Hill through to many that go to the school at Cherry Willingham as well. So we've taken the opportunity to actually put some integrated transport block, which is a unring-fence capital pot of funding from the DFT to enhance the budget to actually do greater improvements. So we're looking to widen the footway on the south side between the Eastern Bypass and Cherry Willingham, looking to replace the culvert that is damaged through there as well, and then footway reconstruction on the north side to provide a connected footway cycleway through there and to enhance the area. And it's sort of a perfect sort of storm, I guess that's the way to put it, but it's a perfect scenario where you've got what developer funding, maintenance funding and actually capital improvement funding all coming together to deliver the scheme. So from our perspective, we think it's a really good scheme, well supported locally. We're looking, should a favourable decision be made, we're looking to start around July this year, taking through to September, and it will likely be a road closure while we do there with the diversion route via Kennel Lane and the 158. Conscious of time, so I'll stop there and ask for any questions.
Thanks, Sam. Any comments or questions? Councillor Vernon?
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for avoiding school term time, because actually this is something we talk about quite a lot and the impact that that has on people. So that's really, really great to see. Can I just ask about, obviously, that is a long time, though, 6 weeks. So is it expected to last that long, or will it be sort of floating closures or bits closed and access at other times? Thank you.
So I'm going to come out with a slightly vague response as I did earlier, that it's difficult until we get the contract and tender out. It's likely to be closed for the duration because although we'll do it in sections start and probably have two gangs running through to do it, because of the width restrictions, we may be able to have two-way lights. That's something that we can look at with the contractor. I'd be very nervous about having the two-way lights too close to the Eastern Bypass, so you get queuing on, so we'd have to stop that further back and close the slip lane, the left in, left out. So there may be an opportunity we could look at two-way lights. Having said that, the diversion route is relatively small. It's not a significant one, so it might actually be a case where the closing it all in one go will speed up, which will reduce cost and therefore deliver it sooner as well. So it might be a case of actually, if you close it, you'll get it done faster and done it slightly cheaper because of the time relation, and it may be worth it with it being a modest diversion to make that decision. But when we get the information, we can balance the two.
Any further comments or questions? Nope. Okay, thanks for that. I then move that committee supports the proposed recommendations as set out in the report, and I ask the comments raised by this committee be shared with executive councillors for their consideration ahead of the decision being made on 17th of June. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Vernon, all those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, item 11, IOA's performance report, quarter 4, which is the 1st of January to 31st of March 2024. This quarterly performance report is found on pages 213 to 405 of the agenda pack, and the report provides the committee with a scrutiny of performance for quarter 4 in relation to the council highway services, including maintenance schemes and complaints. The committee is invited to consider and comment on the detail of the report and recommend any changes or actions to the executive member for highways, transport and IT. Jonathan Evans will... Highways Clients Contractual Management Services will present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. I know you've been keen to hear from me all afternoon. So this report provides an update on all aspects of the highway maintenance service delivery, including the quarterly performance data for the key contracts, highway works, traffic signals and professional services. And within there's some strategic highlights relevant to the maintenance service. So I'll start at section 1.2, the performance report. In terms of the scores for the quarter, the highway works term contract, which is operated by Balfour BT, scored 78.1. That's a slight drop from 78.6 last quarter. Professional services scored 80.7. That's slightly up from 78% last quarter. Traffic signals scored 86, the same as it was the previous quarter. The client, because we treat ourselves as a sort of a contractual partner, scored 83. That's a drop from last quarter at 90. And then we have an overarching key performance indicators, which are measuring sort of the bigger strategic outcomes. We scored 82 out of 100, and last quarter it was 83. So Storm Henk had an impact on some of the aspects of the highway works and the client indicators during this period, but there are areas of continued improvement, such as street lighting service. The ones that are probably worth noting on the client was the early contractor involvement. So we missed 3 out of our 40 schemes in terms of getting that engagement with the contractor early on before the works start on site. In line with the contractual procedures, Performance Indicator 2 and PI3 of the highway works contract both fell below the minimum performance level, so have triggered a low service damage penalty. And again, that's due to the Storm Henk, the impact it had during that phase, and then the follow-on works. But I can report that Q1 has already improved significantly, so that's no longer a concern, I would say, other than we need more resilience during that sort of intense rainfall periods. Move on to the Balfour Beatty. Within the report, there's lots of data which outline sort of the performance relative to sort of productivity that we're doing out in the network, but I'll just run through some of the key points. So the Highway Maintenance Service for 24-25 is looking to allocate or spend approximately 109 million. That's up from last financial year, so which is great news for the residents of Lincolnshire. I'll just run through some of those pots that have been allocated. So we had an additional 10 million from LCC funds to allocate to drought damaged roads, which contains a programme of works targeting longitudinal gap filling. Got an additional 1.8 million from LCC funds that's focused on improvements to drainage resource on the contract. I think that's following Storm Henk and Babbitt. We've got LCC funds that total 8.9 million to ensure that the strategic objectives of the service are met. That's ensuring that we meet our strategic objectives of holding our static position on our main asset groups and improving the unclassified network. And then we've got an additional 4.9 million from the Department of Transport for this financial year, which comes from the Network North funds. So based on this level of funding, it's anticipated that the Highways Infrastructure Asset Management Strategy objectives will be met for this financial year, but it is worth noting that the funding levels for 24-25 needs to be maintained consistently over a prolonged period, ensure that we drive down and get that sort of condition improvement over time. Similar to Q3, storm events in early January had an impact on resource for the Highway Works contract, so we had 1,037 emergency jobs raised. Typically, that will probably be around the 600 mark for this time of year. The impact for winter weather has had an impact on the reactive service, alongside some resourcing issues that's seen a measured drop to its lowest level since year 3, Q1. Balfour Beatty have been quick to address this, as I mentioned earlier. Whilst we've had some issues as an authority, when we benchmark ourselves against other rural authorities doing similar work, we're in a relatively good position. We have got a work stack that's manageable, and it feels like we're on top of it. So we're flexing the resource during intensive time periods and reacting to it appropriately. Move on now to the Professional Services Contract, WSP. The pipeline of work for the highway service remains high, hence the budget allocation figures that I've mentioned there. And with the funding levels this high, it means that we need to use WSP as a top-up mechanism. So the professional services contract enables us to reach back into the wider business. And that's increased over the last 3 months. So that's really useful that the contract's been used in that way, and it's a release valve or release pressure for the service. Moving now on to the traffic signals contract, COLAS. During Q4, the Highway Service were notified that it had been successful in its plan for drivers green light fund bid that we announced at the previous update. So that's an allocation of an additional 500,000 on top of an additional figure of 128,000. The bid focused on an upgrade of the carriageway section and revalidation of scoot controlled sites along the A1434, locally known as Newark Road, and the A57 corridor. So that's really good news for the service. In terms of challenges and improvements, I think it's the workload that's really high within the COLAS contract. So we've got a significant capital refurbishment programme. We've got some Western Gross Corridor development works. We've got halogen lamp conversion underway at the moment, switching out to LED to give us a bit more resilience. We're upgrading Branston Crossroads this summer, and we've got 8 crossings that we're installing as part of the Councillor Crossing Initiative. And obviously that's on top of the day-to-day maintenance. In terms of complaints, during Q4, the Highway Service received a total of 16,000 Fix My Street inquiries and 2,600 calls and emails to the Customer Service Centre. The Customer Relations team received a total of 203 contacts within Q4 from individuals wishing to give feedback, report issues or complain about the Highway Service, which accounts for approximately 1%, which is a good position to be in. The number of complaints entering the formal process had remained the same this quarter in comparison to previous quarter and has decreased 17% in comparison to the same quarter of previous year, which is, I think is excellent given the storms and inquiries that we dealt with in relation to Babbitt and Henk. Moving now on to an update that I bring annually. It's the condition of our roads. So it's a corporate plan performance indicators. The condition of our roads within Lincolnshire is collected and reported on an annual basis and reported to the Department of Transport. LCC also utilises this data as part of its corporate plan performance against success framework 22-23. So this measures the percentage of our network where maintenance should be considered. Generally, a lower number is better. So if I go through them one at a time, condition of our principal roads, so these are our A's. The actual result here is 1.9%. We've got a target of 3%. We witnessed this year a 0.2% decrease in condition, but it aligns with sort of our historical values, so we're not surprised by that at all. And we think a lot of this is to do with sort of surveying accuracy. There's always going to be slight increases and slight decreases year on year. And if you can see on page 238, the historical trend sort of supports that. So it's a good position there. And when we compare ourselves to other authorities on page 239, you'll see that our A road network is in a really good shape. And that's where we want it to be. It's where our most road users are throughout Lincolnshire, and it supports our objective of keeping that one static. The data there on page 239 is the benchmarked one from March 2023, and that'll update next year when we get the other authority data. Move now on to condition of non-principal roads. So generally sort of, the B's and C's. Our actual result in condition is 6.2, and we've got a target of 7% here. We've witnessed this one again. It's a 0.4% decrease in condition, and whilst it aligns with our historic values, we noticed this trend coming last financial year, and we've allocated additional expenditure in year. So we think the additional expenditure will bring that condition back round. So we're sort of on top of it, it feels like, but it is one to monitor going forward. When you consider ourselves against other authorities, I'd say we're in the middle of the bunch. We'd obviously like our B's and C's to be in a better condition. It's linked to funding, but sort of aligning with our strategy of holding that strategy and those asset groups in a static condition, I think we're accomplishing that in this position. Final one, the good news around condition of unclassified roads. Our actual performance is 25.5%, and our target is 26. Every year for the last 3 or 4 years now, we've been reducing that target by 1%, and we intend to do that next year in line with the funding levels that we've received. So next year, our target will be 25. We've had a 0.6% improvement, and that's really positive. When on a network that's so large, it equates to something like 25 kilometres of road that is now taken out of requiring maintenance, and obviously year on year we've got degradation of that network, so it does show a positive trend. If you look on page 241, again probably supporting our strategy of doing accelerated improvement on this group, we are moving upwards in terms of our comparison to other authorities, and I think we've got a journey still to go on. We'd like to be further up that sort of that element. And for now, we're scoring 25.5. I think personally, and part of our next strategy, I think we should be targeting around the 20% mark going forward. That's where we'd like to be longer term. So move now on to the final section, the conclusion. So Lincolnshire's team and its strategic partners continue to deliver an efficient, effective service during a challenging market conditions. Performance reported in Q4 demonstrate the service has maintained a consistent level, although there has been a small drop in 3 of the 5 reporting areas. The service continues to pursue further initiatives to tackle areas of low performance and is constantly striving to implement value for money savings across the service. The funding position for 24-25 is in a positive place and is likely to result in successful delivery of the infrastructure asset management strategy. Funding beyond 24-25 remains a concern due to the lack of clarity. However, there is optimism that the central government announced Network North and local transport fund that has been referenced today in terms of rail will ease that budget pressure going forward. The committee is asked to consider and comment on the detail of the performance contained within the report and recommend any changes or actions to the Executive Member for Highways, Transport and IT. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Councillor Rawlings.
I'm just going to come back to your points on the unclassified sections. A lot of my division falls into that category, and I have some absolutely horrendous examples. In fact, I've two of them come to mind, which is that actually one of them is a national cycle route, which I wouldn't want to put I wouldn't put a Land Rover down, let alone a bicycle. That won't take your head off. Although some brave souls do manage to negotiate it, the road has just disappeared with holes about this big. And even going towards other villages like Subbrook, we've got Church Lane on Subbrook, which is just disintegrating. But this isn't a new thing, they've been like this for years. But there's come a point now where they've gone over the top. And I don't suppose there's ever going to be any money to do something structurally with them other than to do repairs that really aren't going to solve the problem. Could you comment, please?
Yeah, I mean, for Lincolnshire, it's a very challenging network. We've got a lot of drought-damaged areas. We see a lot of impact of a hot summer and quicker degradation on our unclassified network in certain areas of the county. With the level of funding that we've got and the strategy going forward, we are talking about a 10 to 15-year timescale to get the network improved. And as you can see there, whilst we've been doing the retread process, we've been doing a lot of allocation of schemes for those schemes in rural areas. We are seeing a 0.6% improvement, so it's small steps. We obviously can, as an authority, allocate further funds, but that is a challenge given the priorities of the county council. I think there is some hope with the Network North and funds that potentially will be rediverted from HS2, that could be allocated for highway maintenance going forward, and that's something that we're looking for from 2025, 26 and further into the future. But it is worth me catching you, if it's okay, after, just to get those specific locations and make sure we can at least communicate when, in terms of our programme, when we're likely to be at those sites, because we're now programmed out up to 3 or 4 years ahead of ourselves, so we should have some sort of pipeline and be able to give some confidence at least that they are on a scheme list.
Councillor Vernon.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to talk about the complaints around poor information and communication. And I note that you've reviewed it and obviously sort of been able to get that down to basically Fix My Street updates and accuracies. How are you doing that moving forward? Because obviously this Fix My Street is brilliant when it works, and we've said this 100 times in here, but when things are updated or not updated, or sort of it's inaccurate information, that's exactly what the problem is. And it's interesting that that has caused such an upsurge on the number of complaints recently. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and deal with that, Councillor Vernon. We have got a paper coming back later in the year that's going to be talking through some of the improvements and work we're doing with Fix My Street. So there is a lot of work underway, and I think there's lots of different reasons for that communication issue. Some of the inaccurate information might be a member of the public incorrectly or by error selecting the wrong location. That obviously caused a bit of confusion in the system, because we send an officer will raise a job and send Balfour Beatty out, who will try and fix, but sometimes fail to locate it. But equally, something that we've realised during incidents like Storm Babbitt and Henk, where the service shifts into a sort of emergency response. Sometimes our messaging doesn't reflect the narrative of that seriousness of the incident. So it might say, thank you for the inquiry, we're dealing with the response and we'll respond in 10 days. during an incident, that doesn't sort of land well. So we are looking at different sort of functionality in Fix My Street, and almost having an emergency, we'll shift that front-facing platform into an emergency scenario, which I think will help. And there's always, in terms of the process flow through the variety of different ways in we've got as a service, there's always something we can improve. So we're always looking at process mapping, looking at how we interact with officers and how we can schedule when a job goes to Balfour Beatty, for example, or it moves from one status to another, what information we could give back to the member of the public. So I think it's always improving, and whilst there is a bit of an upsurge there in the sort of the type of issue, overall the complaints are dropping. So we're pleased in one element, but obviously there's a bit more for us to do, and we'll take that away, or I'll take that away today as well.
No, I sort of would entirely concur that it's great that the number of complaints have dropped, and I'm not in any way suggesting otherwise. But I just found it very interesting that that's the area, and I think that reflects more people using Fix My Street, as well as more people going on to Fix My Street for updates on things that they've previously placed on there. So that's, yeah, that would be really useful. But you're right, sort of with these sort of emergency style events, to have a message coming up saying, yeah, we'll get back to you within 21 days, totally unacceptable. And as you say, changing the front face to sort of say, right, this is our stock message, don't worry, we're looking at these things, would be really helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Completely agree with Councillor Vernon on Fix My Street. Now, I asked when this was going to come in front of the committee, and they said December. So what I've done, I've sent an email with the issues that I've got, and I suggest other members do the same. So in December, we'll have a little party where everything will be rectified. But I agree again, when it works, Fix My Street is wonderful. But it's when you get, the common one is when it says, oh, we've been to it, complete. And you go to the job and it's got a cone on it, and that's complete. But what I can understand, that from the contractors, that's their way of saying that we've done that bit, we'll move on. But we don't get none of this we'll move on business, just complete. So I look forward to December.
As do I. Yeah, I mean, as I say, Fix My Street, the work that we're doing is always improving. I think it's worth everyone knowing how much Fix My Street costs for the authority. It's about 20,000. So considering that we deliver, you know, in highways alone about 110 million pounds worth, it's a service that is good value. It could obviously get better, and I think we are developing it with the developers, along with other authorities in the UK that use it. In terms of the example you gave there, Councillor Clark, that's the classic one that we can fix ourselves. We can improve that. So that's a gang going out and completing that make safe. Sadly, that's instantly issuing an automated status back to the resident saying we're job complete. But it is complete and partially complete. So it should be a selection of the gang that there's follow-on work required, and then that follow-on work required is the one that should go back to the member of the public. So it's, sadly, we can set the process right correctly. We can obviously train it out, but there's still humans in this process that if a gang unselect or deselect the wrong status, it will send a message back up to the member of the public. So, as you say, when it works really well, it's seamless and efficient. There are some bits that we can focus on and work on, and yeah, we'll bring that back up to the next session in December.
Thank you. I've just got a quick one, so I don't want to draw this out any longer, but it's about, again, Fix My Street. I have my parish actually advertise it as if it's theirs, you know what I mean? They think it's brilliant, it goes out all the time. But the issue is, I mean, I've got on page 402 where we've got an explanation of what might be behind some of the complaints. Now, you know and I know, because it's a bit of my bug, about there was some work carried out that was meant to preserve the lifetime of roads, and it wasn't conducted very well in a certain part of my not just my division, but my village around the corner from me. Now, I know that a resident has logged that on Fix My Street because it's just been, the surface is just gone. Now, I don't know that anything's going to be done about it. They don't know anything's going to be done about it. And will that report, as it's left on Fix My Street, not be in action? Will that actually lead into a full complaint, or does it not make it onto that system? Because, you know, the resident is now clearly saying to me, do I have to make a complaint about this because they don't think, and I tend to agree with them, that it's not acceptable that the work that there was inconvenienced by, is the, you know, the benefit has disappeared. So where do they go with it? And how do I know, as the divisional member, if that work's actually going to be, you know, it's going to be rectified?
Yeah, I think that's one for me to probably take away as a little learning point. If there's something that, well, I know the site, and I know there is an issue that we had there with the surface dressing programme. What we need to do there is probably the resident will need to raise that as a formal complaint, and so that it goes through the CSC and gets a response from us as a service. But I can do that with yourself offline and make sure that that's followed up. Apologies that we haven't got it right on this occasion.
That's all right, thanks, Jonathan. Okay, if there's no further questions then, I move that the report be received by the committee and that a satisfaction report recorded on the performance achieved to date. We look forward to Councillor Clark's Fix My Party in December. Yeah, I ask the comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Council for this consideration by relevant officers. Is that seconded? Sorry, Councillor Brooks. All those in favour, sorry? That's carried. Thank you. Right, item 12 is the committee work programme. This item is on pages 407 to 412 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the contents of its work programme, and the report will be presented by Simon Evans, Senior Health Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. If I could ask the committee just to look at pages 409, 410. That sets out the items at the committee's 4 remaining meetings in this calendar year. A total of 17 items across the 4 remaining meetings, so quite a full work programme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Simon. Do we have any speakers, any comments or questions on this? As I said, a very full programme. No? Okay then, I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed on said pages. Does anyone dissent? No? Thank you very much. And thank you for that extensive report, Sam. Okay, then therefore call the meeting to a close at the end of the meeting, and that concludes the business for today. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance and for persevering with me in being thrown into the fire today. Thank you.